Welcome everybody to the November finance meeting. It will announce that reoccurring in Nicole Terminelli Airport use with the bank. I'd like a motion to resolution for approval of tonight's agenda. Moved by Mr. Forsythe, second by Mr. Feathers. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Approval of the minutes from October 31st, moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Fay. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. First up, we have emergency services with Matt Denner. We have a couple of guests with us tonight. Ralph Mariani, who is the senior account manager for Motorola, and Chris Meyer, the area sales manager for New York. Motorola.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. We do have a little presentation for you. I brought these guys with me for any questions, in case you have any questions that I can't answer. Their terminology and their knowledge of radio systems is a little bit more than mine, a lot more than mine. Good, Dylan? All right. Put together a little presentation for you to kind of show you where our radio systems that we currently have, the movements we've made through the years, where we're at now, and where we want to be. The first slide just go over a few definitions that you're going to see throughout the presentation. You might hear it, I'm just put them all up. So the TLMR is a trunk land mobile radio system. That's what we're looking at going to. TTT is obviously push to talk. Talk groups. Talk groups are kind of like channels, frequencies, but as I'm going to explain further in the presentation, they don't call them frequencies because they're really not. They're talk fast talk groups. Direct and line the channel, and off direct off the network. Direct is on the network, which means if we do go to this radio system, you key up a mic, you'll hear it from one end of the county to the other. Off network or line of sight, that is, if they're working on a fire ground, they can key up. Only anybody in the general vicinity will be able to hear them talk back and forth. It won't go over through the whole county. Next one. End users are the people using the radios. Subscribers are the radios themselves. We did bring some radios here for you to look at in case you wanted to. Well, if you want to put them on the table. P25 standards. A lot of our money comes from either state or federal funding. With that money being spent on intercommunications, it has to meet the P25 standard. And the standards are up on here. You have to be able to communicate, and they're intercommunications. So we have to communicate with other counties throughout the whole state. And that's one of the things we're looking to achieve. Right now, currently, we have a conventional system. Conventional versus trunk, I'm kind of going to explain. Next slide, please. Conventional system. Conventional system, what we have now, we have two end users. They key up, they talk to each other. If you go on the network or off a repeater, you key up. Radio's got to look for the repeater that you turn to. So right now, we currently have 11 different repeaters on the fire side in the county. So you have to turn a channel to that repeater. So if you're in the Hammond area, you got to turn to the Hammond repeater. You can't turn to the one in Star Lake, Cranberry Lake, Messina, because you're not going to be able to hit it. That's field of bounce. So it goes to the repeater, then it bounces back to us over dispatch. You select channels. Like I said, you got to turn to a channel with frequency that the radio is programmed to be able to use it. You have to wait for it to free up before you can make any kind of transmission. And anybody can go buy a radio off eBay or used to be Radio Shack. And if you knew the frequencies, which are published on the internet, you could tune into that frequency on your radio and use it. Where the VHF, currently we have a VHF system. If you go to the next slide. All right. This is the trunk system. Trunk system, what it does is it's got all the end users. The end users key up their mic and it goes to a computer, which here this is the control computer. It'll go to that. Once it goes to that, that channel figures out a list of open frequency it has. It'll grab that frequency. So on that frequency, you can have two talk paths at the same time because of the wavelength. You could use the top of the talk path, and you can use the bottom of the wavelength and be able to use the transmission. So the computer assigns it. It also sees if you're an end user that is not supposed to be on the system, it's not going to let you transmit. You have to be on the system. It's kind of like a cell phone. They all have the unique numbers to them. We would program it into a computer, and if you're not in the system, you couldn't transmit on that frequency or in our system as well. Next one, please. Trunk system kind of went up for a trunk user, those communication paths and trunks and channels, radio group, kind of explain how it goes through the computer network and goes from there. Next one. Advantage of a trunk system, coverage. Greater distances. It also has penetration. It's able to go through metal brick buildings a lot easier. So if you have fire operations, we do have some bigger, larger factories and manufacturers that if we have a structure fire, we have guys inside, they cannot communicate with the incident commander outside. With the UHF system, the trunk system, it does penetrate a little bit better. Convenient with planning and assigning different frequencies. Like I said, we could have 8 frequencies, which is it's going to on a time delay system. It'll actually give us 16. They can be used between law enforcement, our buses, our plows, fire, EMS, all of them. And like I said, they can use the same frequency at the same time as one interference. And like I said, privacy. Privacy is nobody can get on our thing, even scanner land. If you have a scanner, you won't be able to listen to the conversations back in scanner land. So this is an example I found online. I understood it. So currently right now, with our conventional system, it's like a stoplight. So you come up to a 4-way intersection, it's red, which also simulates that somebody else is using that frequency to talking back and forth. You have to wait for that conversation to be done before you can proceed using that frequency. Kind of like a 4-way traffic light. Excellent. With the conventional trunk system, it's kind of like a circle. You don't stop. There's no hesitations, no nothing. You pull up into the circle, you go to the loop, you find your exit, you go. It's smooth, the transmission's there, you don't wait, you get your conversation out, you're able to get your results back. The difference between the UHF and VHF has a longer wavelength. It does go distance at open line of sight, which is great for a down in the river or a valley flatland where it goes through. UHF is higher energy, it's better for shorter distance, but it has penetration, it goes through trees, goes through buildings and everything else. Which is best for St. Lawrence County? There's a few of these here if you want to go through them all one. VHF is, like I said, mostly used for outside, free of obstructions. VHF also travel, if there's any kind of disruptions, barriers in front, the top path's going to get distorted. Lower frequency means a lot more interference, which, as a lot of you probably heard from your departments in the field, all the interference we have. And VHF, like I said, is for boats and marine, like out in the water and unfortunately in the St. Lawrence River, we have a lot of interference. We can get conversations from Buffalo here in Canton because it's coming up the lake and up the river. And you can hear them like they're standing next to the radio, which isn't good when you're trying to have a conversation. UHF, on the other hand, is all better for signal and communication. Like I said, it penetrates through woods, buildings. There's no interference, unlikely to have interference. And it's better, like I said, to reach through all kinds of steel, concrete. UHF is typically used by public safety everywhere else. There's only a few counties here in New York State that are still on the VHF. The ones that are wish that they didn't stay on the VHF. They wish they would switch over at that time when they have a chance. And we talked about the P25, the interoperability that we have. With the P25 system, if we had one of the sheriffs doing a transport down to Syracuse, or one of our ambulances doing a transport to Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, they would be able to have communication back with our dispatch here in Canton. You could be in Florida on a beach, Daytona Beach, sunny. You could have a portable radio. You'd be able to have a conversation with Canton here in Canton. The recommendations are coming from a committee that was appointed by you guys. I don't know if you remember, the committee consists of Mr. Denise sat on the committee. We got 2 people from the EMS field, 2 from the fire, 2 from law enforcement, and then 2 from my office. So we got into a lot of details, we listened to a lot of departments, we listened to a lot of vendors, looked at a lot of different ones out there, we even looked at other counties. We got demo radios from other counties to demo up here. We had radios from Jefferson and Oswego County. We could hear the dispatch center up here. And have conversations with them like they were standing next to us. And we have trouble here in St. Lawrence County reaching our 100%. So which vendor to use? We put it out an RFP. RFPs was extensive. We got a lot of them back. We have a consultant, Blue Wing. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They did a grading system on, and Motorola, who I have with me here tonight, is the one that's recommended to you guys tonight. 1 for pricing, and 2 for the quality of the radio that they're presenting. So they're going to be the vendor of choice by me in my office, and actually probably almost all our departments out here. Question here, what that came up. Do we join the core? Now the core is in Onondaga. It is a computer, like I told you, the control system computer that kind of takes it all and feels it, sends it where it's got to go, and does security on it. There was 2 options. If we join the consortium, which the consortium is all Central New York, they're all on it. The core of the maintenance cost is very intense. So all the counties that are there, I believe there's 7 of them right now, they all pay that maintenance cost together. If we join, we'd be the 8th to help pay that maintenance cost. If we went with a core on our own, it would cost them an additional little over $1 million on top. And I think the maintenance cost is what we got quoted was like $340,000 a year we had to pay ourselves. So, by joining them, there's 2 cores, just backup that's getting ready to put in, and then the primary that everybody's using. So we would save a lot of money, and the other counties, would work together. Plus, with being on the core, like I said, we could have transports down to Syracuse. We could have a conversation with an ambulance from dispatch at SUNY upstate. So they could tell us radio back, hey, we're at the hospital. Which currently now, even the sheriff deputy, go to transport, we'd be able to have that communication. I said, so there's St. Lawrence County is very, very large. As you know, it's the largest county here in New York State. So when I mentioned earlier, we take a radio, we hit the radio, and we have to hit from Star Lake to Messina. St. Lawrence County was too big to be able to do that. So in simulcast, you hit the radio, everybody talk together. We ended up having to do it in 2 cells, which kind of splits one half of the county, the other half of the county. Everybody will still be able to hear, but we couldn't do it with 1 cell. It's kind of 1 frequency per se. We use 1 frequency to do that. We have to do it with 2 cells. So we have to use 2 of the frequencies to be able to get to the county because of the cells. So that's another decision we had to make, and we decided to go with 2 cell system. By recommendations from our vendor and our consultant. So the biggest question come up, obviously we're a VHF system right now. We have to go to a UHF. If we elect to go to this UHF system, how are we going to get these radios from the department? So part of the RFP, what I did is I reached out to all these counties. So on this consortium, Central New York, we have a meeting once a month, and we go to each other's county. We have a meeting in each other's county. I talked to them and said, hey, how did you guys do it for your county, your departments, and your county on radios? So what they did is they did a formula base. For every fireman, every fire engine out there will get 1 mobile, 1 portable. The theory is mobile, they'll be able to hit dispatch, and the portable, when they get out of the truck and they're running the pump, they have to have a radio to do that. So that's why we do that. Tankers, kind of the same thing. 1 mobile inside the truck, a portable outside the truck. That way, when the tender gets there, dump it in the porta john, he has the radio with him, he'd be able to sell that conversation. Ladder truck, we did same thing, 1 mobile, 2 portables. Reason being, you're gonna have a fireman on the end of that ladder. We gotta make sure they have a radio up there, and then we have the guy controlling the ladder down below. So that's why we went that route. Rescue units, 1 mobile, 1 portable. Those are rescue trucks. Those are your brush trucks, your trucks that help the jaws, the heavy rescues and stuff. Ambulances, same thing, 1 mobile, 1 portable. Department based. Every base station, every department has a base station. So obviously we looked at 1 base station to replace that. 3 portables, the 3 portables being the 3 chiefs. A lot of times the chiefs keep the radios with them, keep in the vehicle. They get called out. You'll hear them on the radio acknowledge having the scene, and they're giving orders when they get on scene. So it's important to make sure the chiefs have it. So they can be right back to this. Patrol cars, we kind of do the same thing for a patrol car they have. 1 mobile to replace one inside, and 1 portable for the officer. That's all. County Highway, you see these question marks. Talking with Mr. Chambers over there, they have 109 pieces of equipment that have radios in. So we would need 109 mobiles. I'm not sure what they have for base stations or portables. Doesn't sound like there's much need for it, but we went on the theory that if we want to do it, we're gonna have to purchase 109 for County Highway. Town Highway, we got to draw a line somewhere. We agreed that if town highways want to monitor system, they should be responsible for buying the subscribers to radios on there. School buses, the same thing. Currently, we have we're working with a couple of the school districts. They cannot hear the buses from the school, which is an issue. So we're working with them trying to correct that. But it's something that maybe we can look at once we get the system up. We can open up to all the school districts and the BOCES. So if that bus is anywhere on the route, they'd be able to hit dispatch, they'd be able to hit their home school, everything. Also, if they got in an accident, we would put one channel in there for all the schools that dispatch can monitor, that they would be able to reach dispatch. Any fire truck, EMTs, ambulances, police cars on the route, they'd be able to have a conversation with that bus driver on, hey, what's going on, what you got there, and they would get a heads up on the way in. Also, it could be help us with sharing the cost of our maintenance on the system. Hospitals, what other counties did is they let the hospitals go in, the hospitals bought the radio, but they gave them their own talk pad, so they would have clear communication, because if there was an MCI in St. Lawrence County, we got to look up to these hospitals and say, hi, how many patients do you take? This would give us the opportunity to use one frequency to be able to hit all the hospitals at the same time, plus the hospitals be able to communicate back and forth if their systems fail. And again, it would help us maybe with maintenance on our system. You can just go through all these. These are the system users that we figured all our public safety, first responders. Yes, I'm that talented. We put the little figured you guys would be impressed. All right, highway sites. We currently have 11 sites here in St. Lawrence County. A lot of kind of through the we're proposing 13 into phase 1. All right, on this map here, if you see the red dots, the red solid dots are the towers that we currently have right now. This one down here in Pitcairn, it's got the blue circle around it. That is an Interstate Power Authority tower. We're working with them right now, getting putting some equipment on it. We got a survey coming up. We're looking inside the shelter. We'll be able to put stuff inside there, but they've agreed to work with us. Good partner. As you see, it's kind of geographically located. It'll take care of that end where we have a little bit of issues with the current towers we have now. Next one you're going to see is Star Lake with the yellow circle. I've got a slide up here. It's going to kind of show you what we have currently at Star Lake. The other is Cranberry Lake. Potsdam doesn't have anything. We don't have anything up there. One thing that got brought up when we're looking at coverage, our coverage maps with the radios, is up in the Norwood and Potsdam area had some holes. That would clear those holes. Reason being is with the simulcast, as the tower broadcasts, it overlaps. That overlap causes distortion. That would eliminate that. Second positive feature is the colleges. We know there are a lot of stone buildings. You'd be able to have penetration so that fire chief can hit his guys doing interior work inside. So that was the important of that. The one out there you see just outside the county, that is on Mount Morris. That's on Big Tupper up in Lake. I do have a picture up here to be able to show you that was. That is a 45-minute ride by ATV up the mountain. And if it's icy or snow, you're not getting on. All right, next slide. Kimball Hill and Russell. This is kind of a typical what our sites look like. Kimball Hill is a little different. That is another tower in the back. That's our old one we use. Not sure what we're going to do with it. There are some vendors still on it. We're slowly getting them off and putting them on our new ones. It was built in 2017. It's 190 feet tall. I believe I have the cost on it. It cost us a little over $500,000 to put this tower up back in 2017. Some of these prices are scary. Periscope. White Hill, was built in 17, 190 feet. That was still, again, a little over $500,000. Messina is one of our newer towers, went up at 17, but it's 190 feet, a little over $500,000. Ogdensburg was in 17, a little 550,000, 190 feet tall. 190 feet tall, the secret of that is any over 200 feet, we have to put a light on. You know how much it costs to send somebody up 200 feet? We have a couple big towers, I know. This one was built in 2020, one of our newest in Governor. This cost us a little over $1 million. So you saw 2017, down to here. The reason this one was a little bit more, this is up on a transfer station up in Governor, and it was a hole. We had to do a lot of concrete in here. I forgot how many yards, but it was very expensive to fill it in, to get a foundation, have to pin it to the bedrock. So that's where a lot of that cost comes from there. That is one of our taller ones, 280 feet. I told you, we gotta send somebody up there, but it'd be a waste. I'm not climbing. Waddington's one of our other bigger ones, 270 feet. That was built in 2020, 884,000. That one a little bit cheaper, wasn't as bad as the foundation. This kind of went scheduled as meant to be. We were under budget on this one. We went a little bit over because we needed more concrete. We found out on Governor. Hammond, I didn't get a chance to get up in the picture for you, Hammond, but they all look the same. This one was about 3/4 of the land, it's 190 feet. We did 3 of them in 2021. Starlight, we have told you up to Starlight. This is currently what we have in Starlight for our radio tower. That is a telephone pole with our antenna on it, and that is an outhouse we bought with the Amish that has a repeater in it. Oh, it's 25 feet, next to a wind pole, sitting up there, we store power off of the water tower, and that's what operates it. It doesn't use a lot of electricity. But Cranberry Lake, we are currently on one of the cell phone vendors' Christmas trees. Our antenna is exactly in the middle. Around, you can't really see the antennas for the cell phone, but it's in that bush up on top. During the summertime, this repeater is useless. We cannot use it, the departments can't use it. Reason being is there's too much interference with the cell phones. That's what we found by putting it close to the cell phones. We can't. We had a lot of distortion, a lot of interference. After a lot of investigating, a lot of money to find out what was going on, that's what we found out. So we kind of got to stay away from that aspect. And you notice the difference of interference between the winter months and summer months. And it was because all the people coming up there in the summer for usage. Mount Morris, this is what I was telling you about, that's up on top of Big Tupper. So this vendor, we've been using him for a while. These are all buildings he has up on there. We are renting one building, and there's no towers because it's so far up. Everybody puts stuff, there's one little short tower, but everybody puts stuff on poles attached to buildings, which is so far up. I mean, you can see the view that you have from up on top. That is one of the sites we do rent. So now we're up here. Buchanan, this is the one I was telling you about up in Buchanan, the New York Power Authority. It's we're looking at putting 2 antennas at 250 feet and one at 280 feet, and a micro dish at 150. But if you look at the picture, how far distance you can get with that, it's quite a ways. So that'll help get our radio frequencies and out there for users quite a bit in that area. Potsdam, this is, if you can see the water tower, kind of down on the right hand side is Walmart and Potsdam. So this is a lot that the village owns. They have the water tower on one end, on the other end. Talked with the village administrator. He doesn't feel to be a problem, but we haven't moved forward yet because I want to make sure it has their blessing before we move forward. And met with the village of Potsdam and got into some kind of agreement. Funding. A lot of the funding is grants. We do have a leasing option in there for part of it, and then of course the ARPA funds that you guys put forth. On the grant part of it, we do have a targeted grant. Targeted was a $6 million grant that we received a couple of years ago. We've been trying to get it. Half of that $6 million is going to our backhaul, which is those are they all communicate together, so they have to do it either by fiber or a microwave dish. So half of the $6 million, $3 million is going to put those microwave dishes in and the fiber optics to connect a lot of them together. The other half is going towards the radio system. So our next step we're going to build the 3 towers that I kind of talked to you about. And I kind of got the grant funding that we kind of put up on there, the current grants and the totals that we have now, and kind of where they're going to go. This is giving us the money that we have between, we currently have a SIG grant from 2021 that we're going to use. We're going to roll it over. We asked for an extension because we're going to use it to help build those towers. And we have another one, so altogether it gives us $2,394,000. If we split that times 3, it comes out to $800,000. So we obviously got to put that on the bid, so we'll see where that goes. But we do have some other grants that we can use to put towards them if we need to. 2 of these are in the Adirondack Park, which means we got to go through the APA permitting requirements to go through. The APA does know we're looking to build a couple of antennas there, a couple towers. We did have conversations with them. They did send us over some paperwork that we did. We did do a FOIL request on some cell phone vendors that were looking at the same areas to get those stuff back. But the next step, like I said, if we do go ahead with this, is get further deeper and get the permit going. One of the options we're looking at on all our towers is cell phone vendors. We'd be glad after we got our equipment on it. We welcome cell phone vendors again. That money would help go towards our maintenance costs on our own. And keep our year.
What's the 6 stand for?
Interoperability. Communications. And save the date, which is today's date. I'm here today. I got a resolution that's coming up next. We do resolutions. A upgrade. Like I said, this recommendation came from our office, all the fire departments in the county, and the committee that was appointed from you guys.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions for Matt? Or Chris or Ryan? Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, I know in the past we had some issues with the frequency, the channels with Canada. Can you talk about that a little bit?
We still have issues with channels from Canada. Kind of what I said earlier, we do hear Buffalo. Buffalo, some departments in that area getting toward destruction fires. Our departments are calling the office saying, hey, what's this? What department's that? What road's that? What town's this? It is, we get a lot of interference. Licensing, we currently, I believe, have 5 frequencies. We're in the process of getting more. We'd like 8. We've had a lot of problems with Canada. The application is going to the FCC. FCC sends it over to Canada, say, hey, how do you feel about this? We get rejections letters back from Canada saying, we have this problem, we have that problem. A couple of problems that they've sent back was saying it's going to cause us too much interference. Well, FCC has a regulation, you got to keep under certain disturbance level. We're moving underneath it. So we submitted to the FCC and said, look, this is a rejection letter. We are within the standards. They're like, you're right. Like, this obviously isn't warranted, this rejection. So we got awarded that frequency. So we're currently in the process of getting more frequencies. I open it up and we're looking also Motorola, if we do enter contract with them to help us get more. Other counties in the state have frequencies that they're not using that are clients of theirs. We can take the frequency, do some tests, put the application in. If Canada comes back and said we're good with that, then we're good. We could probably purchase those frequencies, which will help us get to the targeted 8 that we want. I feel safe at 6, which I think we're at 5 now. But I really would feel much better with 8, the size of our county and the departments we have. That answers your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mr. Burke.
Matt, could you go over again who gets the radios? Who gets it? As far as
Every fire and EMS and law enforcement agencies, because we would be dispatching for them, they got to get to us. But the question rose is how many radios do we get? So currently there's a lot of departments out there that have a lot of radios that everybody carries them around, which doesn't need to be. Our main concern was the people that need to contact dispatch, you know, to request mutual aid or whatever. So that's why we covered it, a mobile for all the trucks and portables for them when they get out and a portable for all the chiefs and the base stations. So the only thing that's left out is our bigger departments that have a lot of radios. So in the back of a fire truck, you got the seats that have your air packs in it. So one of the things you get in, you pack up, you grab a radio, there's a bank of radios in, you grab a radio, put them in. This will not cover that bank of radios. Reason being is, I'm hoping it does in the future, but I'm gonna explain when I get there. Currently, they could use them on operations in the fireground, still use them. But what I'm hoping is, as we get into the part of the project, we will going to lease 4 million because we're 4 million short. So part of that lease, once the targeted grant, 6 million that we have, if we spend 50% of that, I can apply for another targeted grant. We can apply for another target, not me. For possibly another 6 million. We are in the top 15 counties in New York State to get that targeted grant that's coming up. So we have a good chance. You know, we only have 14 other counties that we got to fight for it, which a lot of them already have systems. And the opportunity, so I feel we got a good chance. Another option that we have, one of our fire departments, our big ones, agreed to take the lead on this, is we apply for the firefighter assistance grant that comes out every year. If they told me, the state told me, if we applied as a group, as a whole, so the departments that are short on the portables, we go in together on this grant, they said we will not get turned down. So we're hoping in the end, we do get all the radios for all the departments that they voted.
Follow up, John?
yeah, please. So this committee that you talked about that had representatives from, that Larry was on, and you had representatives from the fire departments. They're all in agreement with that.
This recommendation is coming from that. If you want, Larry can speak to that. He's on the committee.
And we've met, we started, excuse me. We started meeting, almost 2 years ago, I think now. And, we've had representatives from, I believe every, fire department, EMS unit in the county. And, yeah, we looked at a lot of things, John. We looked at all the, we've got a good hard look at everything. Coverage being one of the big ones, because the southern part of the county coverage is not good, it's spotty. And from all the data we've looked at, all the concerns that we had, we believe that this is the best system that covers our needs. And I have to say that with the RFP, the Motorola was the only vendor that came to us, and that their coverage, they guaranteed the coverage would meet the specification.
95% coverage in the county with a portable radio on your head.
So that was you know, that was a big selling point for me personally. The other two were close, but they you know, they admitted that they were close, and Motorola said, you know, we're not just close, we'll guarantee it. And yeah, so I think this is, I think we've got a good offering here. There's been a lot of work that's been done. Yeah, I think this is what we should build with, and not just me, but it's based on the opinion of the others that participated.
And it's your question, John? Okay. Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt, you may have mentioned some of this stuff, but I just want some specifics. So in the beginning, I was hearing from the departments that this was too cost prohibitive for them. You mentioned that we're going to provide through these grants.
Radios are very expensive. The subscriber use the radios, they are very expensive. Take one of your smaller departments. Now, how do they have tax base that comes in, but that keeps the lights on the station. Anything else, equipment, everything else, it comes from donations, and fundraisers that they do. They cannot afford, I can't go to them and say, hey, look, we're shutting this frequency off, you guys gotta purchase radio. There's no way you're gonna be able to do it. So that's why I went to other counties that are in the same situation, like, hey guys, how did you guys do this? And that's the formula they use.
Okay. Secondly, did you say where that proposed tower in Potsdam was going to be?
You know where Lowe's is? On
Yeah.
56. On the side of Lowe's, there's a road that goes up, they have a water tower up on top of that hill.
I just, I don't know if anybody in the tower can vote.
But when we get to that point, if you would like to come on board with me, and, you know,
Just
be more than welcome to come.
Okay, and Motorola is an American company. Are most of the components made in America?
So we're based out of Chicago.
Yes.
Most of our components are pretty good in our US, out of Israel, European, yes, we do meet Western standards. Like with that, we draw equipment. Actually, our chips come from AMD, the New York chip. So the chips in your radio, the chips in the transmitters. And partially, all of them.
Great, that's good news. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? You mentioned the core annual cost. How much will that be if we decide to support this resolution?
One county just got on, and we're like, so we're gonna be eight. I believe what they told me is they're paying 34,000 a year. Or one other big question that popped up this year, cybersecurity. If we were to get attacked on the core, it would, and then we're in the process of putting it back up for them, but it would take the interoperability out. It would take the core out. We would be able to have operations in St. Lawrence County. We just wouldn't be able to have operations once we got past the town level. little bit past the county line, but you know, we wouldn't be able to talk. We had a unit in Syracuse back in, until they got back up.
And the other question I had is,
But to kind of add the cybersecurity, we're looking at as a consortium, what it's gonna cost, and we're putting that cost on the yearly maintenance of the force. It's kind of hard to tell what it's gonna be, but right now, all the other users can 34,000.
so I guess the other question, I see Mr. Chambers is here also, is the need for 109 of these vehicles. It's something that your committee addressed, Larry, or do you want to speak to that, Mr. Chambers, or who wants to take a shot at that?
Yeah, go. There's no microphones, so you know.
Yeah, okay, well, I can, I can, yeah. I think that's something that certainly, I think as we get into the ordering, we can certainly go over that situation and find out exactly what we need, and if there's some that we can eliminate and maybe go to some portable, so it's probably some. Fine tune that, if that's where the county decides.
But this would give him the ability to have truck in Star Lake and truck in Sealand to be able to communicate back.
Right, so I understand that with snowplows, you know, his vehicle, you know, I don't know, is every payloader gonna have one in it, every excavator?
Well, that's something that we can look at what we need and put them in, what's available for funding, and we'll make a decision on what is critical, get those and then use them to the best of our ability.
That sounds fair. Yeah. That's all I have. Does anyone else have any, Mr. Denisha?
Thank you, Chair. I guess the last thing I want to leave everyone with, when we began this endeavor, we said that one of the things that we weren't going to do was hurry through this process. Because we're talking, it's a significant amount of money. And did not want to, like we've seen so many times before, you hurry through the process. So you have something in place, and shortly after, I think, gee, we wish we would have done this, we wish we would have done, something different. And recognizing the amount of money that this was going to cost, we wanted to make sure that we got it right the first time. And I believe we have.
Kind of bounce off what Larry just said.
Sure.
We went to all the other counties in the state. What do you wish you would have done? What would you have done different? Any change you would made, what we have done more upfront, and we took their advice when we put this package together, when we put the RFP together.
So like,
Are there critical points associated with not only the equipment, but the location of the equipment? That if something happened at one of those critical points, the whole system goes down?
So there's multiple levels of redundancy. Redundancy at the component level at the sites themselves, out of the switches. There's redundancy on the radios, the base stations that are in there. There's also microwave links. So when you have a tower, so you have connectivity.
You can stand up here, 'cause it's true.
At one of those sites, you have the activity from each tower site. And that transmits down to those transmitters, the transmitters puts out the radio signal. Within those shelters, there's multiple levels of redundancy. So if one router goes down, one switch goes out, one transmitter goes out, there's backup capacity there. Also a trunk radio system, because you're not talking one channel to one channel, it's more of that call waiting, that circle you're speaking of. If you lose a channel, you just move to the next channel. And there's an alarm system set up so that Motorola knows, as well as the customer would know, the county would know through their UEM, emergency management, hey, you're losing a channel, hey, this router went down, it's on the backup. So you'd be able to, we would be able to dispatch services to fix that. When you connect to the core, and the core is the central brain of the system, if you were to lose the core, you would still have local site trunk. You have that redundancy built in, if you lose that. Now, there's dual microwave links going from
Microwave links is a circle,
circle that goes.
so if we lose one, it's still back links from the left side of it.
So let me put it this way, say you lose your router at the house, your whole internet goes down. This has two routers at least on each, two connections and two pieces of equipment on each major component within the shelter to make sure that radio signal is still getting out to the computers. And it's the same as two lines coming into your house, and you've got two feeds coming in to be able to distribute that voice command. The Onondaga Consortium is also moving to a backup prime site, disaster site, so to speak. which means there's two cores, and it's geo separate location. So say, for instance, the whole site, the pine site where the core is exploded, the smoking hole, there's nothing left there. It automatically reverts to that secondary site, so no one fails, no one has a dropout. And this is where you get that 95, it's voice. It has to get through as emergency management.
And on the core sites, the battery power, not 110 your normal electric, so there's a big battery bank in there, so if power goes out, it runs off that battery. Plus the generator kick on and running, but these sites have the battery backup and they have two generators in each site, so if one fails, the other one's there.
So what you're saying is you don't foresee the likelihood that you're going to see a collapse of the radio system,
We've done everything we can to try to.
if I may. Currently, we have a backup system in Messina.
Dispatch center, yes.
Exactly. How is that going to be affected equipment wise with this new system? Is that going to, are we going to have it? Number one, we will have a backup.
I think it's gonna be the same,
And-
they're changing the radios out. So even the dispatch consoles here will have to be changed out and be brand new. On both sides. We're also looking at, right now, we currently have 3 in Messina, we're looking at adding a 4th. And, as you know, the renovations, that's capital improvements going over there, we're looking at 7 positions here.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, so let's move on to the resolution, and then there may be some questions from that. So the resolution for tonight is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Motorola Solutions, Inc. for the purchase of public safety communications equipment, software, and applicable maintenance services, and authorizing of these purchase for equipment. Moved by Mr. Denisius, second by Mr. Lightfoot, Mr. Hagan, and Mr. Cummings.
All right, the resolutions, the presentation that I just showed you, is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Motorola. We go from a VHF system to a UHF system. The total cost was a little over $12,150,000. Like I kind of talked about, we currently have 8 million here now. 5 of the millions coming from the ARPA, 3 million from the SIG target grant we got, which leaves a little over 4 into the line. That we're looking to do a 5-year lease at no less than $1 million a year for that lease, at an interest rate of 4.99.
Okay, questions concerning the resolution? Mr. Denisius.
Not a question concerning the resolution, Mr. Chair, but I just want to, during Matt's presentation, talked about the APA. We actually have a meeting scheduled for next month with APA rep and Senator Dan Stack and someone might Charlie to address this.
Anyone else? Mr. Reagan.
What's the time frame for this?
We currently have 3 towers we're looking to put up, so that's gonna. Starting this year, some of the equipment we move in, so what they do is in Chicago, they build our system in the racks. Then those racks will get moved in, put right inside the shelters. There's equipment that needs to be changed on the towers, so we're looking at possibly at least 2 years, possibly into the 3rd year. And then they got parts that Motorola has to purchase to put all this stuff in. And the availability of that.
Okay, Mr. Lightfoot.
The $958,000 payment per year, is that in the budget?
That wouldn't start until the project is over and done. We would have to budget for it at that time.
Okay, so
3 years.
after 3 years?
Yes. Once we
Enough.
sign, if we agree to the system and we say, yes, we accept it, that's when those payments will start.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Good. I have some questions. Will Motorola be involved with the installation? Will we be installing the equipment ourselves?
No, we do all the install,
All the install?
and it's national roads.
Is there any type of like constant 365 oversight of the actual, once it's installed?
There is monitoring involved, will be part of the consortium as well, which is monitored by our local facility. Based. Local, we have response times that were built into RFP, there's something that.
That's Motorola personal. use.
What type of warranties on your equipment? I mean, they'll probably vary.
It's generally 1 year of acceptance, and then depending on the speed. You have spares built in, you're looking at advanced replacement, and under the maintenance agreement. It's depot repair, so if something's broken, something breaks, attempt to fix it. A new piece is put in before.
Is there any fee for that constant oversight within the means? Okay.
We put it in my time, we talked to other counties and stuff that they stayed up.
All right, that's all the questions I have. Anyone else? Mr. Denisha?
Sure. One last comment. I'm glad you asked about the maintenance. Because that was another big selling point for Motorola. With the maintenance to techs. We're all badged Motorola techs. Within you get one here for a couple hours. The other systems we looked at, the maintenance techs were going to be contracted services.
So I want to thank Bruce Doyle and Matt for coming up with the suggestion of $5 million of these ARPA funds, this 20.9 million going towards this project. Because if we didn't do that, this is a big pill to swallow at 12 billion. So 5 million gets us a good start. So if there's no more discussion, all those in favor of the resolution can signify by saying aye.
All right.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
All right. Chris and Ralph, you're free to grow. It gets pretty exciting later on. So. Big river.
You didn't leave any wires, so not much use to us.
Right. Not yet. Thank you, sir.
Good trip home. Okay, so we'll move on to highway with Mr. Don Chambers. First resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for Department of Highways to increase fuel repair and road maintenance expense. Moved by Ms. Bianco, second by Mr. Burt.
Thank you. This resolution will modify the department budget. Basically, increasing revenue from repairs, equipment and other departments. So increasing the revenue basically coming in, and then also increasing our appropriations for repair parts and fuel. So basically, and increasing the revenue there to cover parts and fuel. The other is a decrease in appropriations in a project area and increasing the maintenance. This should take care of our budget till the end of the year. I don't think there's any- Unfortunately, this is necessary, but again, doing it within the budget. Within budget.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers concerning this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is approving Bridge New York funded highway project for Lazy River Road Bridge over Grass River, bin number 3341-820, thing number 775379. Moved by Mr. Denisha, second by Mr. Forsythe.
Yes, thank you. Originally, the board approved this project as a federally funded project and started the preliminary design in the standard format of 80% federal, 15% state, and 5% county. However, the county was awarded Bridge New York funding since we started the initial design on this project. So now the New York State DOT wants us to sign another agreement to utilize funds for the remainder of the project out of the Bridge New York funds, which is 95% federal funding and 5% county. So the net result is that the county is paying the same amount. It's just coming out of a different area and actually funding it through completion.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Our next resolution is authorizing issuance of a negative declaration related to the replacement of Lazy River Road Bridge, bin number 7353.23 and bin number 3341. Moved by Mr. Sheridan, second by Mr. Perkins.
Yes, in order to move forward with this project, a full environmental assessment was needed to be done on this project. Our consulting firm, Department of Judas, put together documentation that has been shared with the legislators here on Newport Drive. This structure, just to give you an idea of what we are proposing, it is currently a 3-span structure and with pretty sharp curvatures coming into the structure. The proposed bridge would be moved partially downstream using significant amount of the existing right of way, but requiring additional right of ways to be taken to accommodate the improved curvature coming into the structure. And to accommodate, go from a 3-span to a single-span bridge. Right now there's steel piling for 2 of the piers in the river, which is a debris and impact issue. So considerable change, therefore, which required some right of way takings to be moved forward with New York State DOT. So that's why we're in the full environmental assessment. We have met with every one of the New York State DOT, has met with every one of the property owners, and the property owners were invited to a public information meeting that was held in Russell. All those impacted property owners were at the public hearing, and I spoke personally with one of the property owners, Mr. Long, the New York State DOT and our consultants. All parties have been brought up to speed as far as what the impacts would be, and they're doing their best to mitigate concerns. With that, we're asking for a concurrence from the board for a negative declaration.
Any questions? Will those property owners be compensated financially?
Yes, they have to under the federal regulations that go on.
Is it by the acre, by the foot, or?
It is goes by the appraisers. The New York State DOT actually has a real estate division that will have the property appraised, and they negotiate the impacts with the property owners. So it could be monetary as well as elements such as vegetative screening and things such as that included.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next up, also for solid waste, Mr. Chambers, the resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the solid waste department for overtime expenses, moved by Mr. Smithers, second by Mr. Burke. Chambers.
Yes. Again, this modifies the Department of Solid Waste overtime budget within the department budget and not going to the contingency that was set aside for overtime. One was the decrease in the temporary part-time positions that we were actually unable to fill and covered that with overtime. And then also the remainder was with anticipated increased revenues above and beyond what was in the budget. So again, doing the modifications within department budgets.
Any questions from Mr. Chambers? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our county treasurer, Renee Cole. And the first resolution is charging tax items and omitted tax pay. By Mr. Lefkow. Mrs. Cole.
Thank you. So this is an annual resolution. It's presented every year around this time of the year in order to put these items on the upcoming tax levy. It represents amounts due to the towns for tax refunds, cancellation of taxes, and assessment errors.
Okay, any questions for our county treasurer? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. The next resolution is adopting mortgage tax report, moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Forsyth and Mr. Beck.
Okay, thank you. So this is a semi-annual resolution that allows the treasurer's office to distribute monies collected by the county clerk that are due to the towns. The county clerk turns over the funds to my office on a monthly basis, and twice a year, the county clerk submits a report to the state for approval to disperse. Upon approval from the state, we submit a resolution for your adoption. This amount represents from the time period April 1st to September 30th of 2022.
Okay, any questions for our county treasurer? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a lease agreement with lot number 21 for space located at 206 Ford Street, Ogdensburg, New York, for property tax collection. Moved by Mr. Smithers, seconded by Perkins. It's cool.
Okay, so this resolution is for a lease for Ogdensburg property tax collections. If you recall, last year, in January of 22, we opened a part-time temporary office in order to accept county property taxes due to St. Lawrence County. This is authorizing us to utilize the same space for the 2023 tax collection season.
Any questions for Mrs. Cole? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, real property, Mr. Bruce Green, and Bruce. The resolution is elections, real property, and community college apportionment for the year 2023. Moved by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Forsyth. Mr. Green.
Good evening. This is a yearly resolution that shows the chargebacks will be representing the elections, the property office, and the community college. Should work on it.
Okay. Mr. Lightfoot.
Never mind. I don't have a question.
Okay. Anyone have a question for Mr. Green concerning these charges? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Good, so next up is, let's see here. Is our county attorney, Mr. Steve Martin. First resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with CNS Companies for environmental investigation, property owned by Lewis Hearn. Moved by Mr. Smithers, second by Mr. Burke.
Thank you. I think the board is aware we've been working on these types of projects now, actually very actively for the last 8 years. This particular project over in Messina happens to be a former railroad station, which is very similar to a place that I'm very familiar with, the Hoodout here in Kansas. But it's actually a location that had historic petroleum usages. We're going to send in CNS, hopefully with your permission, to do some soil testing there to see if it is in fact.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Bob? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is modifying the 2022 budget for the St. Lawrence County Self-Insurance Plan for increased costs of scheduled loss of use awards. Moved by Perkins, second by Mr. Forsyth and Mr. Sheridan.
Thank you. I've already been before the board once this year associated with an increase in the funding associated with scheduled loss. All they essentially act as an advance against any settlement of these claims. So they actually reduce our long-term expenses, but get a short-term up in cost. They are at the request of the claimant, so they aren't something that we can actually control when they come through, and they're often driven by difficult financial times. That's essentially what we've seen here. Last time I came, We had calculated out the amount to carry us through to the end of the year, but had 6 scheduled losses reports come through, all of which ate that money up very quickly. So the good news is this essentially reduces our long-term exposure. The bad news is that we take a hit up front out of the reserve fund associated.
Okay, Mr. Forsyth.
Steve, how many individuals would be affected by this?
The anticipated amount is there's an additional 6 SLUs that are supposed to come through between now and December. That's 6 individuals.
Okay, anyone else? All those in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution for our county attorney is adopting the St. Lawrence County Corporate Compliance Plan. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Sherry.
Thank you. This plan actually was crafted by our risk manager, Jody. Jody is actually certified as a compliance officer and has been providing assistance to our various departments that provide medical services. And that's really what the compliance plan is about. Under the law, each medical provider is supposed to have an established compliance plan that ensures that they are engaging in safeguarding of private information and medical information related to patient care. Medicaid requires it. The Department of Justice has even included segments within the sentencing guidelines associated with criminal prosecution. And that's really what gives you the parameters for which you're supposed to develop this program. Now, St. Lawrence County is what would be known as a hybrid provider. As a hybrid provider, we have certain components that we provide that are in fact medical services. Health, community services, even certain elements of as well as the jail. But most of what our operations are not related. Because we have that medical component, though, we become responsible for having clients and it governs the activities of those various entities and the dissemination of information that they contain with respect to patients.
Okay, any questions from Mr. Button? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next up is a discussion or an update on tax foreclosure process. Thank you.
That's much broader a title than actually is really needed for this evening. I know the board is aware that I've spoken to you specifically about 2 properties. One property that is in the Norfolk area, another property that is in. I know I have spoken to you about the request from the owners of those particular properties that they were subject to foreclosure, but were requesting an opportunity for the board to consider a position of giving the interest fees based on extenuating circumstances in the event that they posted the amount of base level of taxes in escrow. I wanted to give the board an update. The deadline had been set for November 30th for responses. We have received a response from Ms. Ellen Smith, who in fact did provide the full amount of base taxes that's currently being held in escrow. But we have not heard from the additional gentleman, Mr. Richard Thayer. He has not provided the base level of taxes. I have prepared a resolution with respect to Smith that will come before you for consideration of the civil finance. But I have as of yet prepare a resolution.
Good. Any questions or comments from Mr. Button? Welcome, Nicole. Good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Button.
Thank you.
Next up, from the Industrial Development Agency, we have a representative. I don't know if we have Patrick Kelly with us or not. We do not. Rich Williams.
Good evening. guys. No, you're stuck with me. Patrick's not with us this evening.
All right. Fair enough. That's where I made it. You realize, you know that. But okay, I'll read the resolution. The resolution is approval of payment in lieu of taxes agreement in relation to a solar project on parcel 40.004-2-20.22 /1 located at 50 Cogswell Corners Road in the town of Madrid, New York. Moved by Mr. Arquette, second by Mr. Burke and Mr. Smithers. Go ahead, Richard.
All right. So before you is a pilot resolution for a 487 pilot for a solar project to take place in Madrid. It's Acer Solar LLC. This is outside the IDA typical pilot. Because of their financing structure, they can't have a third party involvement. Whereas typically with an IDA pilot, we take a leasehold interest in the land. Their financing structure doesn't allow for that. So they've asked for the standard state 487 pilot for this project.
Mr. Burke.
Is there a host agreement also with this?
Did you hear that, Mr. Williams?
I don't believe there is. I haven't heard any discussions with the town and the developer talking about host community agreement.
Is it too late for them to do that?
I don't know that it is or isn't. If that's something the town's interested in, they should probably reach out to the developer and at least have a conversation. That's not something the IDA would typically be involved with. That would be directly between the town and the developer. I could help facilitate that if they need it, but we wouldn't be involved and that wouldn't be part of a pilot agreement.
Just,
Go ahead, John.
just ask, what's the size of this? I know it's been.
So 35 acres, is it? Is it,
The project footprint, I believe, is about 33 acres, sitting on about a 103 acre parcel. And it's a little over a 4 megawatt system.
Mr. Quinn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to dovetail off John's concern, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that within those host agreements, generally the decommissioning portion of these agreements can be very important, even though it might be 20 or 30 years down the road, becomes a pretty big piece of business that if it's not taken care of at the onset, it could potentially be some problems.
Yes, so far, all of the pilots that the IDA has been involved with, there has been a host community, the decommissioning agreement attached to the pilot. Typically they're required to restore the land back to previous development, and there's a bond or financial certificate of some sort that's set aside to accomplish that.
Okay, Mr. Lightfoot.
Can you tell me how the figure of $5,000 per megawatt for a 15-year period was arrived at?
When we first started doing the IDA pilots for the solar projects, we were at 4,250 per megawatt, I think it was. And looking at neighboring communities, some were about that, some were a little higher. And when we go south, I think Jefferson, Lewis counties were pushing between 5,000 and 5,500, depending on using a matrix of what the land was. We settled on 5,000 per megawatt. It seemed to be consistent, at least fair looking at our neighbors. It provided some consistency when we're talking to developers and the communities. Nobody felt that they were getting, cheated out of anything or being asked for more money than the projects were worth.
If I may?
Yeah.
It seems to me that this is being quoted as a $10 million project. And in my estimation, my personal feelings is that that amounts to about $22,000 a year divvied up between the county, the town, and the school district. And the school district standing to realize about half of that money. Not that money isn't important and money isn't everything, but it seems like $22,000 on a $10 million project is a pittance. And I'm just wondering, there are significantly higher payments per megawatt being paid to our south. From what my understanding is, And I'm just wondering, why we settled on something that appears to be at the low end of the spectrum as far as per megawatt reimbursements or imbursements to the stakeholders. I guess that doesn't require an answer or anything. It's just a
Statement, okay.
statement. Unless you'd like to comment.
Well, I think when we settled on that, we felt we were sort of in the middle of the road and maybe to the higher end of the middle of the road to that point. We haven't seen a lot of these come through this year to justify much of a revisit. But what we have seen are, projects that were costing, $5 and $6 million 2 years ago are now pushing $8 to $10 million just because material costs have gone up that much.
Just a comment, and it doesn't require a response. Here we have a project that was unanimously turned down by the St. Lawrence County. Beg your pardon? Yeah, the planning board. And why did they turn it down? Because of the discussions that this board has had over the past months and years regarding prime farmland being used for solar projects and windmill projects. And I think that people are, people have every right to decide what their land is going to be used for, and I don't begrudge them that. But I think that the combined wisdom of the people on the planning board saw that this is a problem. It's probably going to continue. I know in the city or in the town of Oswegatchie, where I live, we've got a couple of projects that are going within a mile of my house. And I really think that it is being overdone. And I think that the way it's being explained is that this is enough to light up for 1,000 residences. And I question really how that's going to work. How will people apply for that? I don't see anything that would set forth any way or any route to accomplishing that. If there is, I'd certainly like to know about it. I think the other part of that is that because the town of Madrid saw fit to override the county planning board, which is within their right according to the law that governs how these things are approved and moved forward. It's really, I'm really torn between two things as far as my feelings about it. And I'm going to come down on the side of the property owner because as much as I hate to see prime farmland going to cite these projects, I think that it's a dangerous road to be on with all of the farmland that is being eaten up by these projects. So I thank you very much.
Mr. Forsythe.
I share very, very similar concerns. $10 million business taxed in the county of St. Lawrence.
Oh, I don't want to get.
Pay well over 100,000, well over. In the city, I believe it'd be $500,000. So $50 per thousand. And here we're doing it for 20,000. The 1,000 homes that Joe just mentioned, none of them are going to be ours. Power gets undergrid and it gets shipped to wherever it goes, and no one here sees the benefit. I understand that the land's probably assessed or taxed at a minimal amount, so 20,000 is better than nothing. But I think we're undercutting ourselves drastically on this, and it's just going to run rampant. I've said it before that this is going to run rampant, and I 100% understand the landowners. I understand it 100%, but I think the shortcomings to St. Lawrence County in general. These are way too far off, way too far off. And maybe it's the time to look at these pilots. And let's get something that's realistic, because a business worth $10 million, my property taxes are drastically more. And this is a pittance. It's absolute pittance. So I agree with Joe.
Mr. Berg.
Can I say something, please? So
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
one of the things we do is we use the state's model that they created for these projects, right? To present a value for it. And so when we were running these, we find that, based on the state's model, which they don't use the value of the project, the cost to build it, they use the location, the megawatts of it, and land lease. So when we're using that type of model, what we're finding is that the taxable value actually comes in fairly close to what the pilots are. I think we've had one that showed that the pilot was actually more than the taxable value would be using the state's model, with whatever flaws it has. And I'm not here to argue with any of that. But just as when we're doing our cost benefit analysis for these projects, we use that to compare to make certain that we're not too far out of line with what we're trying to accomplish. And so far, I think we're fairly close. Where the pilot adds some benefit is it gives certainty both to the taxing jurisdictions and to the developer for their financing package. So I don't know if I would use the $10 million construction as you would with, like if you're opening a business. I don't know that in the state's mind that gives a fair comparison. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I don't know. And there's people far smarter than me that'll argue one way or the other on that. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Mr. Reagan hasn't spoken yet, John. Well, you have neither on this. All right, your hand was up first. Go ahead, Mr. Bird.
Could I ask Bruce Green a question? Sure. Bruce, the payment in lieu of taxes, is that payment in lieu of all taxes? Does the landowner have a responsibility? I mean, again, I guess that's part of the question.
Yes, yes, it would be payment in lieu of all taxes.
All taxes.
Yes.
So, I think just to say it, I think Joe's point, you improve something by $10 million. You're being taxed as if it was just bare land. Probably something wrong with that.
Point of clarification, please.
Yes, go ahead.
So we work with real property to create a slash parcel number for these. So the base land stays on the tax rolls. It stays just as it's taxed today. So the slash number is for the improvements for the project itself. So the base taxes that are paid today will continue to be paid just as they are. There could be some variations because of improvements, loss of agricultural benefits, that kind of thing. But the project is dealt with as a separate entity.
Mr. Reagan.
Rich, if the county legislature were to vote no on this, would the developer and the landowner be able to go ahead with the project without our participation?
The simple answer is yes.
If that occurred, it's my understanding that then the local assessor would have to use the new state guidelines on assessments for these kinds of projects. And I've been told it then becomes sort of a crapshoot on what the final valuation assessment is going to be. Because the state has sort of set things up, so that, the solar wins, in many cases. And, by doing this kind of pilot agreement, which, you know, none of us may be terribly thrilled with, this gives us certainty over the next 15 years that, this will be paid to the county, to the town, and to the school district. And, you know, that's my understanding. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding. So the calculator that the state puts out, right now, it's not being mandated that the assessors use it. And I suspect at some point they may do such things. But right now it's put out there to help guide both, you know, IDAs and the assessors to understand what they're looking at. Right now, if you look at solar projects around St. Lawrence County, if you look at the assessments on them, you'll find, you know, a wide range. They're just all over the place. We have one 5 megawatt system that's in place that's assessed at $360,000 as a total project, and that's on the tax rolls. That doesn't have a pilot on it. And then we have other ones where they're, you know, $1.4 to $1.8 million for, you know, a 3 to 5 megawatt system. So we really are all over the place. There isn't that consistency that, you know, at least with the pilots we're trying to bring.
Mr. Forsythe.
Is it possible? I don't know if we need planning or Bruce, probably all combined. Do these hydrograms, where they assess that, what do they generate? My understanding in Colton, some of these areas, they're the highest assessed properties there are because they generate power. I wonder how they compare and are assessed as opposed to these solar projects. That ought to be the state equivalent. It's like the guy at Monopoly, the banker, keeping track. You know, you make the rules to subsidize these solar farms. Meanwhile, I think if I owned a power dam, I'd be fighting every assessment. I'd want a pilot. I want the pilot starting tomorrow. And I think this is great grounds for them. Just my thoughts.
Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just see this as the state's push for green energy with the state model that you talked about. $1,000. I don't really trust it. $10 million project should be assessed at a lot more. It doesn't matter if it's a business or solar or wind or whatnot. I don't think this is fair assessment, so I won't be supporting this.
Yeah. Seems like we have a lot of questions. Acer Solar, is this they got other projects here in the county?
They have one more project in the pipeline that's in the town of Canton. And as I understand it right now, they're in discussions with the town for a host community agreement before they come forward with that. But that'll be another one where they're looking for a 487 pilot rather than an IDA pilot.
Is there a timeline for this resolution that's necessary for this company?
We're targeting before the end of the year.
Well, we could, if we wanted to, if somebody wanted to table it, we could move it to finance in December.
I would make that motion.
So motion made by Mr. Lightfoot to table, seconded by Mr. Sheridan on the issue of tabling. Any discussion? Well, there's no discussion. All those in favor of tabling, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
So we have Mr. Perkins and Mrs. Haggard. Okay, so it's tabled to finance in December.
You guys, thank you very much. You have a great evening.
So next up for planning with Mr. Fultonhauer, the resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with New York State Department of Transportation, accelerated transit capital funds and modifying the 2022 budget. Planning office moved by Mr. Fay, second by Mr. Forsyth and Mr. Smithers.
Thank you. Good evening, all. Yes, this is before you, as we received the notification after our operations meeting on the 15th of November that the county would be eligible to receive $309,792 in this accelerated transit capital program funds. And we like to receive these funds. They're very helpful to help manage the bus system. They're usable for a variety of different components. As long as what we use the money for has a 5-year lifespan. So the buses that we buy all have more than a 5-year lifespan. Bus shelters, maintenance equipment for the buses is also eligible through this funding. So it is something that we received this year, modify the budget, and spend in subsequent years. So change resolution, allow that to happen.
Hey, Mr. Smithers.
Is the state mandating purchase of electric vehicles in the near future for the county?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Smithers, that may be coming down the. That it would be a requirement.
Hey, Mr. Berg.
Jason, is this pass through money, or is it, or will the county actually have all of the money spent on?
Yes, the county will have control.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right. Next up, Youth Bourbon, Alexa Backus Chase. Resolution is authorizing the chair to sign the 2022 Resource Allocation Plan signature page for Youth Development Program. Moved by Mr. Smithers, second by Mr. Forsyth and Mr. Burke.
Good evening. This request for signing of their signature page wraps up our youth development program grants, and it allows the approval of the grants. That also will qualify for us to receive the state reimbursement in the amount of $106,456 for the 2022 youth development program. This is typically our annual request to sign a signature.
Any questions about this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Our next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign the 2022 Resource Allocation Plan signature page for use with and educational funding. Moved by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Burke, seconds.
And by signing this, this also certifies the approval of our youth sports and educational funding for the 2022 program year, and that is for $9,424.
Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we have the Vacancy Review Committee with Bruce Doyle.
So this last group of vacancies, one that falls under my department and the other under highway, will include the total for this month. The first one, I'll go ahead forward and come down speak to the custodial worker, and then I'll have Dylan speak to the delivery clerk positions. This position actually has become open because of a promotion. So we're very excited. We've actually moved an individual over to assist in our purchasing office. So as a result, we have this vacancy to be considered this evening.
Okay, any questions for Ruth?
Okay, and then delivery, I will turn over to Dylan. This is for our print and mail room.
So you notice that we have two vacancies here, both for delivery clerk. We had a promotion within the print mail room of the delivery clerk in the first authorization here that left this vacancy. That is creating a chain reaction, as it often does, where we have another delivery clerk that works half-time under the county administrator and half-time under DSS and DSS reception. So the delivery clerk and the DSS reception, everything goes as planned, will be a reassignment into this first vacancy you see here. And then with your permission, we hope to submit these together so we can reduce the downtime to backfill the sheriff position.
Okay, Mr. Boris has a question.
If, under the DSS side of it, is there any reimbursement available for that position at all, or it shows not?
So, I wouldn't have the number with me, but that would go through the regular DSS. I'm not sure what percentage, but actually some of that salary would have.
Any other questions, for Mr. Silver? Yeah,
Last up, we have highway. Our superintendent, to speak to motor equipment grader.
Thank you. Motor equipment operator vacancy was a result of a resignation of a relatively short-term employee, about a year and a half. The employee took a position with a town.
Any questions for Mr. Chambers?
Thank you.
So next up is the budget review. Let's take a short break, couple minutes, stretch, and allow Ruth to get set up.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. All set? Focus there. Today we have a bunch of presentations starting Ruth Doyle.
So thank you for another opportunity to discuss the 2023 tentative budget. I will warn you, I've gone 2 slides north of the last 2 committee meetings, so there's 10 slides for you tonight. But as our last scheduled review, I wanted to take a couple of minutes and just highlight a few areas of importance. But these final 6 departments include one of the enterprise funds, one department that holds the majority of all the revenue in the county, another with the 3rd largest staff in the county. So those are just a few of the highlights of departments that certainly you can ask questions about, seek clarification as we move forward to finalize the tentative budget. Slide, please. First area I wanted to review with you tonight was health insurance. And while we spend time, we've got a health insurance committee, we have a very aggressive consultant who works to find rebates and change programs and bring us advice and recommendations as required. I've given you since 2019 actuals up to including the projection for this year, and then what we put in the budget, as well as the FTE count. So certainly they are dependent upon one another. And in the last 5 years, we're looking at a 9.5 or just under 10% increase in our staffing. So along with it comes the increase in benefits. Although you'll see, we've been able to manage that and maintain it from 2021, we're coming down just a little bit. From 2022, we're just going up $282,000. But we're looking at pharmacy taking a pretty big impact, a 38% increase over the 5 years from 6.3 up to 8.7. I don't imagine that's a great surprise to many of you. The overall increase for 5 years has been 37%. That's approximately 7.4. I think you hear everything between 7 and 12, depending on the industry standard. We covered right around that 7.4%. The opt-out, again, this is a benefit to opt out of having health insurance provided. And we've seen with an uptick in staff also an uptick in opting into that program. In 2019, we're at 173,000. We are going to end the year probably just shy of 300,000. So we're seeing an increase in folks taking that. Some of our newer employees are opting out as they come into the workplace. Some of whom still receive benefits from another entity, or perhaps they're still with their parents' insurance. So we've seen that number go up just a bit. And I've adjusted in contingency for that as well. Any questions on health insurance before we move on? You'll see you can track the dental and vision. Many of you will recall that's provided through the CSEA Employee Benefits Fund for our employees. Admin costs are increasing as well. We're looking at flat coming in hospital medical, coming in just a little, just under $1 million south of what we've done for this year. But again, just mentioning with those FTEs creeping north comes the healthcare costs with it. Okay, next slide.
Much is the opt-out per year that we're offering
You mean individually?
individually?
I believe it's 2 and 4. 2 for single, 4 for
$2,000?
family. Yep, prorated inpatients.
Okay.
The next slide, just take a moment here to point out our highway capital projects. You can also find these in Schedule 6 of your budget books. We've got the County Route 35 over Trout Brook scheduled, both engineering and design and construction for 2023. Right of way for the Lazy River Road, the Grass Rivers included here for right of way, as I mentioned, in County Route 49 over the east branch of the St. Regis River. So just under coming in at under 3.7 for 2023. There are continued projects that you have approved this year and last year that continue to completion, whether it's an engineering phase or construction and inspection phase. Our highway department and mainly our superintendent has gone above and beyond to forecast and order in the prior year so that we aren't waiting as much as a year for supplies to come in for many of our critical projects. I think you all know we're playing catch up always with our roads and bridges, but we were able to, and the board approved an additional 10 miles or 2.1 million to be spent this year that has been spent. So we're looking to get ahead where we can and when it makes sense. So this is what's budgeted for 2023. Any questions on that? I have our superintendent here. Okay. The next slide speaks to our spend associated with our outpost projects. And this is an area that was a little bit of a risk. It certainly was something we haven't done before and is something we will complete in 2023. So we went into this with grandiose plans of paying for one of the facilities from fund balance and financing 2 of them at approximately a total budget of about 9.9 or just under $10 million. We're right now at a spend of 8.04 or encumbered amounts associated with these 3 projects. This 450,000 is budgeted in our capital to help finish those projects. At budget time, we were at, in the Lisbon location, about 3.2. We're at about 3.4 now of that spend. In Russell, we were at about 2.5 when the budget was presented. We're now at about 2.7. In Potsdam's right around the same at 1.8 spend associated with those facilities. I am excited. Don has informed me that we have moved our vehicles over to the Lisbon location. We will be only running 1 truck out of Canton. So that should dramatically decrease the truck traffic coming in and out of Canton. Now, for maintenance and once fuel is up and running at those locations, it will also, again, decrease the traffic beyond just the snowplow trucks. Having these outposts, I think, for the convenience of the size of the county, for managing the functions that we provide to our county, this is going to be one of our best investments. So here you see set aside for each one in each of the areas. These are broken down between the sand and salt storage and the equipment locations, what those spends are budgeted for in 23. Are there any questions?
I've just asked Mr. Chambers, are the men and the personnel that are working with it, are they excited about these projects? All this new equipment, having warm stuff inside?
Certainly, I think there was some reservations about moving the location, but at this point, really, I think now that seeing is believing, and I think with that change, I think it's really changed some of the viewpoints of my employees over there. Much more positive. Things are working very well, as the administrator indicated, looking at just running the one snowplow route out of Canton. That's certainly made that end of the village much quieter. Having the equipment inside for equipment.
Great, just foresight.
And it should be cost savings too, with all the vehicles not having to travel as far and. Shouldn't it? That's the whole intent.
It does have, some impact certainly on that. Like, having gasoline readily available. Certainly, to look at some reduction in that, but with the increases in fuel, this has been a very difficult year with trying to manage costs associated with fuel. So,
I think the timing is perfect.
Faye.
How much sand is being stockpiled in downtown Canton now compared to what?
The pile that we have there right now, Mr. Fay, is what was basically left over from last season. And as we're basically going to dwindle that from 15,000 tons down to 0. The intent will be to have just salt and look, we've got a salt 4 bays there. One will put the sand inside of there, basically a few truckloads just for icy occasions. The other bays we'll be having salt in, and we fill up the village trucks with salt because we work hand in hand with the village. So their trucks are into the county facility to get salt, also fuel. So that partnership is continuing to. So we do have that traffic with the village equipment coming in, but county traffic was reduced. And sand pile, like I said. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Any other questions? Or move on? Okay, as I have, next slide, as I have in each of the committee meetings, just want to highlight the departments that we're covering this evening, so that if you do have pointed questions, You know where to focus them for these 6 departments. I will just make a few remarks. Highway, as John was just going over a few areas, there's a $700,000 increase overall this year. That's the only appropriation change. Revenues increased 203,000. We have increased fuel 563,000, along with trying to take a more uniform approach across departments and looked at approximately a 20% increase across departments so that they have those appropriations available, as well as set aside an additional 150,000 in contingency above the 100 that I already typically budget, so that we have funds available. It's so volatile right now. I think that we need to be prepared. In the best scenario, we don't need to use it, and it's either reappropriated or it returns to fund balance. So there's some resources out there. We've taken a careful look at this. It is certainly something that we are not going to get away from, the use of fuel. We all feel it in our own budgets, and we wanted to make sure that we're attentive to it and its impact on our departments. In county administrator's budget, I'll just highlight briefly, I did talk about this in my original presentation, a reduction in the fund balance policy appropriation of 80,000. I added 1.5 million to contingency from 2022. That's what I just mentioned, 150,000 in energy. There's a new 200,000 for the Emerald Ash Corridor to continue the work that the ARPA funds have allowed us to begin. I think that my hope is anyhow that I can move that out of contingency in 24's budget into our forestry budget, and that it is no longer new money. It's an automatic for the county to address this issue on an annual basis. We can plan, we can schedule, and we can incorporate this into the work that we do. Also, a little bit unusual, I have increased untargeted to $1 million, which has never happened, at least in my time. The appropriation for 2022 was 750. We are nearing the end of our contingency. We are, with the appropriations that will be approved at December's meeting, going to be very dangerously close to the bottom of the contingency. And so we want to be wise about having funds available. Certainly they're available in fund balance, but that's also something that we'd like to have contingency available for first. We like to mitigate that. I have increased capital from 500 to $1 million. I also went over that, certainly can speak to those areas as well. Healthcare buyout, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in our healthcare slide, I've increased that from 230 to 250. As you saw, we're looking at nearing 300,000. But that at least chips away at the majority of that expense because we don't budget it. We spend it in the locations where those employees are opting out. We don't set those budgets out into departments because we don't know. An employee who's opted out this year may this month in open enrollment enroll for the next year. So we believe that budgeting this way, following the expense this way, we're really keeping tabs on what that expense looks like. Also, I just want to mention, as I did at our original presentation, there's a $500,000 appropriation, 550 for the MAP program. Many unknowns associated with that. So we set some funds aside. Certainly, if we recognize that we have enough funds budgeted, as we talked about in the sheriff's budget, that's not something that has to be appropriated. That's why it's in contingency. We'll only move it when you approve and when you have all the information to understand the impact it's having on the correctional facility. Also, just want to point out county administrator's budget as you're looking through both your summary and the budget documents, that the buildings and ground staff has dramatically increased the total personnel in the county administrator's budget. And we started that in 2021. County attorney's budget, I just remind you that there's 3 funds, admin.
Did you have questions?
No, I don't want to interrupt her when she's finished out.
Go ahead.
The contingency. What are the 2 biggest drivers of the decrease in contingency?
The decrease?
Didn't you say there was a decrease in the amount
I said
that we had in there?
Funds.
That we were near the cellar?
What's that?
Did I not hear you say that we were near the?
Oh, you mean this year? My
Yes,
apologies.
yes.
We have had the big drivers you've seen in corner transportation this year. We have funded the court-ordered treatment at 1.5 million. And I will remind you that we budgeted 3 million total for this year. We've looked at overtime, the hazardous tree removal also in addition to the ARPA funds at 200,000. The exterior maintenance and courthouse updates were 90,000. Those are the main drivers, and one of the smaller ones, when we were awarded, not in the budget process, but when we were awarded the COPS grant. We set funds aside in targeted contingency also, that's just over 52,000. The rest are very modest, 17, 6,500, 23,000. Many departments have made great habits of finding it within their budget. You've seen this year some folks move out of even their 100s. I think the sheriff brought that to you. So they're moving appropriations that have already been approved. They may have been approved for personnel, but as they're looking at their projections, it won't be used. So they're saying, let's repurpose that money. That's really all contingency does. It takes some funds that we've targeted and moves them out into budgets where we have expenses we weren't thinking.
Okay, so I haven't looked at the contingency for the 2023 year.
Sure.
What's the dollar amount for that?
4.9.
4.9 million.
Yes, sir.
And we're down, where are we with the 2022? What are we left with in contingency?
Before the December board meeting, so after
Okay.
November's, out of 3 million, we have $587,534.
Thank you.
Well, and it's also, that list for 23 is also in the original slideshow in one of the slides there. Any other questions? Okay, just mentioned as a reminder, county attorney has 3 funds. It's the admin, normal operations, workers' compensation, as well as our liability fund. And that's one area I'll speak to a little bit further on about use of the reserves for 23. Net change for the county attorney was 82,000. We're looking to make better utilization in the social services budget for 23 of where those county attorney expenses that are utilized for the family court setup are budgeted and expended so that we can get revenue. Legislator Burke asked a question very early on in the budget process about which is that more advantageous, having a contract for services and having everything sit in the county attorney's budget, or the way that we're doing it at the current time. And we're going to look at that again and make sure that we have all the facts to maximize the revenue. If it means more to have all of the staff sitting in the county attorney's lines and have a contract and revenue attached to it, we'll bring that to you. But the way that we've separated it out now, we've apportioned people to each part of the county attorney's budget and to the DSS budget. So they're sort of broken out into pieces. When you see those FTEs at 0.2 or 0.5, that's the arrangement we have set up right now. In real property, last month you heard our director talk about expanding access to the mapping and the image, being able to draw down those maps at certain level for free. So we're taking a bit of a reduction this year in revenue of about $3,500 associated with those who do this for business will pay a subscription, and those who use it for their own personal uses will have access for free. We also are going to be able to make available the pull down of tax bills. So many folks will call because they can't find their tax bill, and it's very difficult. You can pull up Allenton now. I'm sure you can print screen, but it's not the same as having your tax bill. We'll be able to do that as well with the version that we're getting in 23. We also have pending retirement of a key staff member associated with the tax roll preparation. So that piece right now, we've hired the individual who's in training. So right now we're carrying in 22 two salary costs while that person's training. In 23, when our coordinator, who's been with us for almost 30 years, will retire, that person will take over, and the position will go back down to 1. Any questions? And then lastly, I would just mention solid waste. Also being, as a reminder, 0 cost to our levy as an enterprise fund. There is a tip fee increase that we are working to address through what we're seeing from Development Authority. We originally were looking at a budget with approximately an 8% increase, and we're mitigating that for 2023 in half. So we're only taking a 4% increase to those rates, and we'll look to do the other 4%, pending certainly what we hear and see from their expenses, so that we mitigate that for our solid waste transfer station users. There's a 1.3% change in staff, as you know, and have just approved. The recycling center will be complete late spring in 2023. So we did ask and have received 1 additional FTE to run that. I think many of you are familiar with the number 15, as long as we can recall. That's how many have worked in solid waste, and we're getting up towards 17 now. They have been particularly impacted by military leaves and medical leaves that have hindered operations. So I think that's a good move on the board's part to staff that appropriately. And certainly we'll want to schedule, when that recycling center is complete, a visit so that you can see what's going to be happening over in the Ogdensburg area.
Dave.
This is just a question for Don, at the solid waste transfer site. On our website, is there anywhere that we list the different materials or the different items that you can take into the transfer site and the different bins? Like the last time I was there, you had an air conditioning coolant section, like appliances, refrigerator. Is there a spot you can see everything? You know, mattresses, I see they're in the way back at Lisbon and whatever.
Well, and a lot of that has been additions like the mattresses,
Yeah.
that was.
A couple, 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, that was part of the permit for dank. As far as getting the expansion on the landfill, well, we had to have waste diversion, so that was a quickly added item that we had to make do with within our existing facility.
But is there a spot on the site that says that, yeah, we accept this and separate bins for that, or?
Well, we certainly, that's something we can look at.
Every time I go, it's like I see a new bin, and I'm thinking, geez, that's where that goes, you know, and whatever, so well, if I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people don't know, you know, and, you know, Jerry's my phone friend at the list, but whatever. You know, but, yeah,
Certainly,
yeah, just,
you know, we're looking at changes for.
Any other questions? Thank you. So moving on, next slide is the slide I've been bringing to you by department with the breakdown of each individual staff, the percentage that department staff is of the total workforce. So of the 6 departments we're reviewing tonight, that's 25 or 26% of the county workforce at 187 staff members. The total budget here is a little bit skewed by the revenue in the treasurer's office. But it works backwards to a $35.5 million benefit to the county for operations, but you can see each department listed there. And for this budget, that's about 30% of the total cost associated with these 6 departments. Of the overall county cost of the 272.4, it's 12.9%. So you see the total county budget, that's straight cost. The total budget is the levy, and the total percent of total county cost is the overall budget. So these 6 departments come in at 12.9% in the negative because of the revenue in the county treasurer's budget. So this one's a little more confusing than the others, but the standalone treasurer's office is 87 million after they pay for their own operations. But as a reminder, services, you looked at 44% and operations, 33% of the staff. So it's a nice breakdown. I don't think that's why we broke down our jurisdictional committees that way, but it does give you a pretty balanced look at all of the departments. So I'll just leave that slide up for a moment before we move on. Okay, next slide. I wanted to give you a visual associated with sales tax. So if any of my conversations have lent themselves to what your concerns may be associated with the tentative budget, some concerns have been expressed regarding sales tax. And when you look at on the left chart, the budget we've provided and the performance that we've seen, the budget is in the orange color, and the actual, if you trace back to 15 and 16, we were just in our first 2 years of after asking for the additional 1%. So you remember there was quite a volley with the tax rate at that time and what sales tax was doing. And so those numbers I certainly can provide to you. I gave them to you in a long list last year. But since that time, and since about 17, they started climbing. And so we climbed, but not as quickly as the performance has. In 19, we began collecting internet sales tax. And I think we all know without a major revenue or major retail area here in St. Lawrence County, the internet sales tax, I know I do my part, but is definitely performing for St. Lawrence County and continued north since that time. You all, I do believe, have the latest sales tax from the treasurer in your email this afternoon. But also in 2023, we will have to re-up and ask the state for the additional 1%. If you remember, along about 2020, they extended the ask from 2 years to 3 years. So many counties have been asking for a number of years for home rule without boundaries. So once you make it, you can reduce it when you like. You don't have to keep coming back. And they did go from 2 years to 3 years. So movement, but not complete success with that. We continue to see improvement. Last year, I'll remind you, we came in much higher than we planned, but we also didn't have the AIM funds at just over $1 million, or the hospital distress fund at just over 400,000. So we would have easily been north of 75 million had those two pieces of funds associated with sales tax been added to. But I did just want to show you that. And then on the right-hand side, the sales tax sharing in the orange is the total, and coming up in yellow is how much we give to the local municipalities. So that gives you a better picture, I think, rather than just seeing the numbers of that sharing arrangement. I would say there's about half and half that share, and they're at all different rates across the state. And one draw at the sales tax collections, as you may recall, is the preemption by Ogdensburg now. They're being paid directly, with the exception of that last 1%. We're paying them through the county for their portion of that last 1%. So they get a half of what's collected in Ogdensburg. And I think we would all agree that we still continue, and they still continue to see improvement there related to folks getting it right when they're submitting their sales tax collection. So that's really the look I wanted to provide to you in 2021. We shared 30.37 million with municipalities in 2020, 26.4 million. So any questions associated with sales tax?
Is the total shared 30.5?
In 2021, it was 30.37.
Go ahead, Mr. Smithers.
When Renee gives us the sales tax figures, I would like to see how much we have to then send to the city of Ogdensburg out of that last 1%, that one. And I haven't seen that from her.
You can share that.
Can I speak to that with
Go ahead.
for a moment? And I did respond to you, Mr. Smithers, today regarding that. The numbers that I send you do not include what we've received on Ogdensburg's behalf, because we exclude that right off the top. We when we log in to check our sales tax, we also check what the city received so that we can calculate how much to withhold from ours before we record it as revenue. Because the money that we're receiving for Ogdensburg never actually hits any of our operational budget, because it is a due to other governments account. So what you're receiving doesn't include Ogdensburg to begin with. So just so that you know, because it's no longer part of a sharing arrangement like the previous arrangements that we had. So I don't know, it's not, I mean, we can tell you what we look and see that they received and what we calculate that we're carving out, but I'm already reporting it to you net of their money, because it's never ours to begin with.
So that's confusing to me, because we get 1%. And out of that 1%, we've agreed to send half of that to Ogdensburg. So
no,
is that
actually, the calculation is based on what they receive for us to back into what their 1/2 of the 1% is. So it's a calculation we have to manually perform based upon what they receive directly from the state. It's not reported to us separately. We just get one lump sum sent to us from New York State, but we have to manually calculate how much of it is the city's, and then we do not record that as our revenue. We record it as due to other governments. So what I'm reporting to you is just straight county sales tax.
I think Mr. Smithers still has a puzzled look on his face. You'll have to take it up with him directly.
Yes, okay.
Mr. Forsythe has.
Well, along the same lines, we must take that in, that 0.5%. So I think what he's trying to see is what's the breakdown. So, okay, so the 1/2 is due to the city of Ogdensburg to other governments, but the other half should be reported somewhere.
It's in because it's already ours. Yes.
It's lumped in, but how do you differentiate? I agree. You know?
So I think Mr. Smithers is looking for a report of what that 1/2 of 1% that the city got. Is that what you're looking for, Mr. Smithers?
Yeah. Okay, it'd be a different report. It would not be incorporated into what I give you. So they would be two separate charts, because they are already segregated when we record them.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Reagan,
So can you send us that?
could you send that to us, Renee?
Yes. And it's only going to be how much we calculate ours was. So we record it there, and every quarter we zero it out when we send them their payment. That's why it's recorded there. So, yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, next slide. This is a slide that I'd like to provide you with. It's in the front cover of your budget summary. It gives you that quick snapshot of three things. It shows you in a category sense, which we talked about in the first presentation. It breaks down those FTEs, which I would just remark that the full-time equivalents have gone from 799 in 2021 to 816. I'm sorry, 2022 to 816.1 in the 2023 budget. Where you see the change is from 40.37 in the less than full-time to 48.57. That has been our change this year. Also, you can see the total county budget along with where that levy, which as we've talked about several times, is remaining pretty flat. But a reminder of this $274.2 million budget, which is up 14 from 2021 or 2022. I'll just remind you that we did use and are planning to use the 3 reserves, and that is using fund balance to offset the cost of county government. And you can see that there, you see in the total appropriations, total revenue, and then appropriated fund balance. So this year, we only appropriated 250. And for 2023, we're appropriating from those 3 separate funds, which I'll review just as a reminder in a moment, the 601,000. So we've increased that, but our still has our fund balance. So we've apportioned out some of those to mitigate some increases that we're facing as well. But as I mentioned to you overall, 49.3 million in personnel, 66.4. So the way we record our benefits is a little bit difficult in terms of being straightforward with the total. We record the revenue, we distribute out in the budget, you'll see in the 800 accounts is where all of the benefits are captured. Now those are captured and a revenue is paid to the treasurer's office, and then the treasurer's office makes the appropriation payments. So from that perspective, I think that number over the years, we've tried to make sure we maximize getting those expenses out in the budget, because it'd be much easier not to, but putting those out in departments so that they can capture revenue, whether it's state, federal, or local funds attached to those benefits that are cost to the county. And so the total county cost with the fund balance appropriated is 51.7 or a 2.7% increase for 23 as recommended. Questions? Next slide. So to revisit what I brought to you, the original presentation, we did not go to the tax cap this year. We came in 1 million below the tax cap. And while we're never entirely certain, there's a convoluted formula that the state requires us to use in determining what the tax cap is. And if in fact you exceed the tax cap by some calculation that changed or some miscalculation, then you have to set aside, and we've had to do this once, funds in escrow to be used against the levy the following year. So we understand the process if in fact we were to go over the tax cap without having the board's approval. So if you'd like to add the $1 million, you would take the true value tax rate from the $7.60 that I've proposed up to $7.75. And I've indicated here, as I did originally, you can certainly contribute to the capital projects that we're undertaking in 23, additional positions that had to be denied in the budget process, or additional highway miles. And I've only approximated in the 2.1, we were able to do 10 miles, that this would do about 4 or 5 miles, and or a fuel contingency. So those are just some suggestions if you were to choose the optional tax cap, and that would take the levy up to 52.7. So that's something I'd like to make you aware of. The board has never chosen to take this issue any further than me providing you with what that looks like. Questions? So the current true value tax rate represents a 41% decrease from 2022, from $8.02 down to $7.60. Our assessed valuation increase for this year was 524 million, more than the last 2 years combined. So that also assists in us being able to decrease the true value tax rate. We've used the fund balance in a responsible, careful, and intentional way. In that way, liability, we're using 106,000. There was a payoff, and I think Steve mentioned it in his conversation, that they had paid off an $800,000 obligation when we purchased a policy for them 4 years ago now. So they were paying $213,000 each year, and they completed that payment. So that means the fund goes back up where it was mitigated with that revenue. So what we've chosen to do is to mitigate that increase over 2 years rather than the full hit of 213 in 1 year. And we're going to take out of liability the $106,625. And so that means coming into 24, you'll have the full amount that revenue had previously offset. Secondly, for the stop loss, again, to mitigate the impact of that cost, we have reduced it by increasing our deductible for this year, but we've cut in half what that impact is on our levy. So we have reduced to 203,756 coming out of the self-insurance reserve. You may remember earlier this year when we purchased stop loss, we took the entire portion out of the reserve to pay for that. So now we're incrementally increasing that total cost and sharing that out with those who use the fund. And lastly, in solid waste, which doesn't impact the levy, but it is a responsible use of fund balance, we have set aside $291,250. These three totals come up to the 601 to split in half the cost of the equipment that they're looking to purchase for 2023. So those are the three uses of fund balance, increasing over prior year. And I think heading into another extremely unpredictable year, this budget mitigates that impact on our taxpayers. This provides some relief for the many demands on homeowners, and it recognizes trends in revenue that we've been seeing and we believe are responsible to put into the 23 budget. Last slide. So next steps, final steps, will be certainly any changes the board would like to make this evening. And then as the chairman of the finance committee has requested that Chair Akers move to deliver the tentative budget to the full board for consideration. And that would begin the cascade you see here. The board can review the finalized budget. We're very fortunate that as a committee of the whole, the jurisdictional committees have been looking at this for the entire month. Our public hearing will be set with pending the transition from finance committee to the board. The public hearing will be scheduled for December 5th, and the adoption would be considered in the same meeting, much like we do all of our local laws. When we hold the public hearing, we follow that with the adoption of that resolution or local law. Once adopted, we're required to advertise that 2 times within 20 days of adoption, and that would authorize the availability of this budget on January 1st, 2023 for use to support operations. Questions?
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to bring the 2023 tentative budget of this finance committee to the board of legislators. Moved by Mrs. Tiger first, I believe, second by Mr. Redwood, Mr. Forsythe, Mr. Arquette, Mr. Perkins. Discussion on this, is there any discussion on this resolution? Mr. Smithers?
Yeah, is this appropriate to bring up concerns about the budget at this time?
Yes. You're not like this.
Okay. On the 25 additional St. Lawrence County employees for 2023, are those currently hired or to be hired in the future? What's our current number of employees?
I can get that number for you. The positions, the difference, is that what you're asking with regards to for
In 2023, there's 25 additional. My question is.
So it's dual answer. The board's created, and I have that, let me just get that, pardon me. The board has created, I believe it's 12 positions, so those will move through the process, and those are potentially filled or being filled. The positions that have been created for 2023 include a deputy director for community services. So this was on your services. You have this in front of you. A clinic manager for the correctional facility. hours for the licensed mental health counselor and nurse practitioner. So they're working now. The 2023 budget has an increase for the MAP program, for example. A heavy equipment operator for solid waste, which we've talked about, and moving those staff in from community services, which were in the abolished amount, that show an increase in the sheriff's office. But they're not new positions. That makes sense. So the board created 14.53, the board created through resolution, and the 10.77 FTEs are also those elections and inspectors, 7, I forget, that will be 0.2 and 0.3 scheduled in. There's 250 of those. Does that answer your question? So it's a mixed answer, but you have a slide that details it and the services that's on your desk.
So then my concern is about sustainability. And you mentioned that there's a lot of uncertainty financially. And if you look at prognosticators, they're all over the place as to what the future holds. Our sales tax revenue, you've in the budget estimated another increase, which you've been quite optimistic there, I think. So that's a concern. I like to be optimistic, and I hope that turns out to be the case. And with the tax levy reduction, my concern is if this is sustainable with all those questionable areas in the budget. My question is about not necessarily 2023, but the year after that and after that, the sustainability of this.
Your question in that?
Yeah.
It's more of a concern about the budget.
Sure. And I share those concerns, and we always think the budget team on a quarterly basis when you see your financial updates. The sales tax is certainly something that is a volatile piece of the economy. And I think one of the things we're going to do, and I've talked with Chairman Akers about this, who's also expressed concern, is watch this number. As I mentioned, you've seen your report come in today, and we've exceeded budget for this year already. But we'll watch that and report out to you on a quarterly basis. There's a couple other significant revenue sources that we were expecting. They're not budgeted because we don't know until we have them, but they may help offset if there is a shortfall. We also have the ability, if need be, and the board would like to see this occur, we can make a reduction there, reduce what we're giving to municipalities. But you also see us come back 2 and 3 times a year to give you, to give us permission to pay municipalities more. This also is addressed in this budget. So we share your concern, but we also think it's unreasonable to have revenue coming in above what we're budgeting for a long period of time and not recognize that. That gives some relief to the taxpayers, and it shares it out in other areas where those revenues are coming in.
Sounded like me right there, that last sentence. But I had talked to her about the sales tax revenue. That she assured me that with the additional pays, possibly compact money and others revenue sources, so it will be at least flat.
We'll watch it very close.
Any other discussion about this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Right.
Keep going.
Yeah.
So by way of update, there's no formal action requested, although with the approval of the Motorola resolution and hopefully the approval at the board meeting, that will move forward the $5 million. We'll bring that to you as was indicated by our director, Matt Denner. The order of funds available, he has $3 million available for the first commitment. He's also been instructed by the state to utilize those funds first in order to get back in the queue for additional grant funds. So going through that $3 million associated with the cost here, and then we have the $5 million, which was appropriated to assist with this project. And then on the other end, that $4 million we talked about on the financing side, being able to potentially apply for grants to offset that cost in the out years. So really trying to quilt, if you will, a nice funding option that minimizes or completely removes the obligation on taxpayers. For something that everyone stands to benefit from. So that certainly will be moving forward. You'll hear probably next month or in January to move those emergency services funds. The broadband internal staff met so that we could update the committee as well. talking more about what to do next. So 2 RFPs have gone out, 2 RFPs have come back. There was some success with the bidder. The second round of the RFPs, however, challenges presented that did not allow them to move forward. So now, in an interest and also watching the clock of spending down these funds for broadband, re-strategizing, looking at the Lewis County model, and really taking seriously focused efforts at specific targeted areas for funds. And really taking a serious approach of putting an RFP out that the committee could look at and bring back to the ARPA committee and turn to the board for approval to get broadband installed. So that is moving forward. We'll give a more detailed update to the committee as well. The water and sewer, those applications came in, 15 came in. The deadline was the beginning of, the beginning of November. There were 14 municipalities involved and $6.9 million in requests, or just shy of $3 million worth of funds. So the group is going to meet and they're going to do their scoring. I'd like to pull the ARPA committee back together to hear from that scoring committee and then bring that forward so that those items that and that resolution can move those funds out for use.
Next question, Dave.
Just on that note, is there a maximum amount awarded? Have you decided on that yet, or?
I don't believe they have created a ceiling or a floor. I think they're going to do that as they look through the.
Prior to.
Yeah.
And you're going to get it committed together in December for the new year.
Soon as we can. Done the scoring. And then also looking to award the Emerald Ash Board, get the work done. They are ready to go. I believe they can have it done within, I believe, 10 days. And so looking to get that moved forward as well. As I mentioned, changing our effort on the county's behalf that was jump started by the ARPA funds. So that's also from Emerald Ash Board efforts to get that done. Unless there's questions, that's all I have on ARPA this evening.
So we'll go with resolutions, the county administration report. First resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Auctions International Inc. for the sale of government assets by online auction. Moved by Mr. Forsythe, second by Mr. Lightfoot.
Mr. Silver's going to present.
Okay. Go Silver.
So you're used to seeing Auctions International in relation to our tax foreclosed properties, sale of our tax foreclosed properties. We also utilize Auctions International for sale of government surplus items, talking highway equipment, really anything we want to put up. So we need a new agreement with Auctions International for this separately from what we do with our tax foreclosed properties.
Questions, Mr. Silver? Mr. Forsythe.
Maybe it's for Steve, I'm not sure. When does Ogdenburg come online with being involved? The properties from Ogdenburg.
If you're talking about with respect to county's taxes and stuff, county has already had first round of dependents associated with unpaid Ogdenburg County taxes. If you're talking about the ability to close on those taxes, that we would be filing notice and petition on the first Ogdenburg property associated with unpaid county taxes in November.
Any other questions concerning the resolution?
Yeah, and if I could just, so looking at 2017 through 2021, we've averaged around 27, just over $127,000 per year in the sale plus or surplus auctions with Auction International.
There's no cost to this contract, right?
There's no cost to St. Lawrence County, no.
Okay, anyone else? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Police Butler Corporation for electronics device disposal and data removal. Moved by Ms. Fiacco, second by. Perfect.
So if you're like me, you probably have a drawer at home with a bunch of old used cell phones in it, so did the county. So the purchasing office decided to do an inventory of what we had around the county, clean out those drawers, and we collect them all in the purchasing office. And we now have decided to pursue an opportunity not only to receive some sort of minor compensation for the devices, but also they'll provide the service of cleaning the data, making sure that no county-owned information maintains on devices in accordance with HIPAA and other regulations that we have to follow. So we'll be receiving at least a minimal amount of revenue for the devices, and you know, in collaboration with our compliance officer at IT, who also vetted this company, we'll get those cell phones out and make sure that the data is safe.
Questions, Mr. Soper? No cost, it's, you said, or this says no cost. Is it right?
Oh, no, they will pay us for the devices minimal amounts. So for example, of the inventory that we have, I mean, quite a few devices, we're expecting around maybe $450. We have a lot of older type iPhones and phones that they pay, you know, depending on the device, we have anywhere from $10 to $60 per device.
And it's a China company. Sorry. Yeah, to be sure. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Next resolution is modifying the 2022 budget to the county administrator's office for costs associated with community college tuition. Move by Mr. Scudder, second by Mr. Burke.
So this resolution, out of the last 8 years, 4 of those years, you've seen resolutions because bills come in higher than we anticipated. So we do our best to project, but 18, 19, 20, and 21 came in under or over budget. Under in 2014, 15, 16, and 17. So we don't necessarily know who is out there taking courses. They come in and get certificate of residency. They take that to their college. They may not finish their classes. They may not take a full course load. There's a number of variables, but when the bills come in, we verify those with the local municipality, and then we pay the bill. We also then charge these back 2 years later to the municipality. So we hold that cost for 2 years before we share that back with the local municipality. So this year we're seeing, as I mentioned, this would be the 5th year out of the last 9 that we're seeing an increase. So we're bringing these to you. You may also see another resolution before we close the books in 422 associated with these costs. But this will allow us to continue paying the bills that come in.
Questions, Mrs. Haggard?
This is Doyle. Given the cost of universities, do you expect this trend to continue because a lot of students are working their way up the ladder of education? But can we expect this to continue? In other words, community college, then 2-year schools. It's so much lower than community colleges.
Potentially, because we'll have to take a look at and watch the costs as they come in. On a quarterly basis, we share those out with you. So if we need to make those adjustments, we'll make them as soon as possible.
Mr. Reagan.
This is directed to the county administrator. To encouraging the guidance counselors at the 18 school districts to consider more strongly our own local SUNY colleges. Since Canton has many career tracks and does, you know, a 1-year certificate, 2-year associates, 4-year program. When kids go to the SUNY colleges, the towns, the communities don't have to pick up the tab. When they go to the community colleges, it gets kicked back to the towns. And you know, when we're seeing steep drops in the student bodies at SUNY Canton and SUNY Potsdam, it really worries me. I've seen over the years every so often, every so many years, there are proposals kicked around in Albany to merge or close some of the SUNY institutions. And with the dramatic drops that we've seen in the enrollments at our two schools, we really need to be encouraging our young people to look at them because they provide a great education. They provide a lot more programs than they did, 10 years ago, and a lot of exciting career opportunities. And, I think that, we should be doing what we can to steer that into our schools, so that, these young people will consider when they get out, starting their careers here in St. Lawrence County as well.
Anyone else? So we're continuing to not receive any funding or reimbursement for the Manhattan Institute of Fashion Institute of Technology. Is that correct?
As far as I know.
What would a county or a town or municipality have to do to opt out of that? Would that be possible to take legislation?
We can find out. Not aware of any options. I know that some counties have taken more challenged approach and stopped paying bills. I think that they have not found success with that in the state. It reminds them of their obligation. But certainly something we can look into. The board's passed resolutions previously requesting those obligations in state statute be funded without much success.
I know at one time it was over $900,000. This would be several years ago. Joe probably remembers
We could get that number for you.
that we had that counties or municipalities had paid over $900,000 in tuition, which was supposed to be because it was at the Fashion Institute of Technology, supposed to be reimbursed or covered. Was it 100%?
I think there's a split. I think there's a
50%, but they never budgeted at the state legislature. So because of the cost of community college, the Fashion Institute of Technology.
That's
Cost
not cheap.
is not cheap. Continue to pay. So I don't know, in answer to your question,
Certainly something we can-
something that we could
Absolutely.
promote it.
You bet. And to Mrs. Saggard's question earlier, we have increased our budget for 23 by $145,000.
Okay. All those in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, the next one is establishing a date and time for the organizational board meeting. Moved by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Sheridan.
So this resolution comes before you to schedule. Just as a reminder, at finance in December, you will see the rules of procedure, which provide for the date and time of all the committee and board meetings. But until that guidance changes, we will proceed, and we always hold the organizational meeting on the first business day of the year. And that makes it this year on Tuesday, January 3rd. And we will host the swearing-in ceremony prior to the organizational board meeting start. So you'll receive more details on that very soon.
Any questions or concerns? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next, resolution is calling on the state of New York to fully fund county law 18B assigned council statutory pay levels. Moved by Mr. Lightfoot, second by Mr. Forsythe.
So there were a host of resolutions that you've considered from NISAC this month. And this was one I particularly felt needs attention. It has been in dialogue for a number of years, but the last time I switched to 04, I believe. And certainly in the last even 5 to 7 years, we've seen a dramatic decrease in attorneys willing to take 18B cases. And just as a reminder, we have our public defender's office, who's primary, our conflict defender's office, who will take cases once there's a conflict declared. And then we move to our assigned counsel program through our county bar association, who provides for the 18B services. So the challenge we have is tremendous in family court and challenging in local criminal courts. This would address in part some of the feedback we've received. There's talk of as much as doubling. Now, we also are not foolish enough to think that that wouldn't also then have a ripple effect on our existing legal staff as well as our prosecutorial staff. We understand the impact of these. However, we are responsible to ensure adequate representation, and that is getting more and more difficult. I have pulled in the assigned counsel administrator along with the indigent defense staff to begin brainstorming. I did mention to you briefly that Bar Association notified that they will be concluding our existing month-to-month contract in April of 2023. So as we try to strategize and look at options for going forward, most important and central to all of this work is adequate representation. And this is one way that we believe it would be supported.
Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, discussion, okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I think it'd be good to have this resolution sent to our neighboring counties and asking them to support resolutions of the same.
Yep. Thank you. We can do that, it's friendly. Mrs. Haggard, did you have a comment or a question?
No, sir, I was voting on.
Okay. And so all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is calling on New York State to sufficiently invest in 911 funding to ensure proper maintenance with existing systems and prepare for the next generation 911 technologies. Moved by Mr. Burke, second by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Rockwell.
So this is another one of those nice act resolutions, but this, as you heard this evening, we are slowly making progress over the last 6-7 years, making our tower improvements, now moving to radio communications. Very shortly in 2023, we'll be bringing you a major request for renovations to a new 911 dispatch center. So all of those things lend themselves and wouldn't be happening without grant funds. When the tower project began, we came to you and said, if we're going to move forward with this project, we have, uncertain certainties with state budgeting that would allow us to move forward and build towers as we're awarded grants. And we've done just that. The county has had very minimal involvement in paying for the construction of each and every one of those towers that we have built over the last 7 years. Moving forward, we want to encourage the state strategy to remain the same. This board has taken up and decided not to increase the 911 surcharge. So this state funding also provides an opportunity for us to continue receiving funds through the state.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next resolution is designating the St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce as the St. Lawrence County Tourism Promotion Agent. Moved by Mrs. Haggard, second. Mr. Reagan.
So this resolution comes before you each year as a designation is required for some of the programs that the St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce participates in. This designates them as the tourism promotion agent. You will notice it's absent authorization to sign a contract because we will be in 2023 and entering the last of a 3-year contract with the chamber. That will require some conversations to occur in 23 going forward. However, what this does is it moves 5% increase to the chamber for occupancy tax revenue sharing. So they stay flat at 45% for 22 and for 21. 50% is not a model that's unlike the sharing arrangement that the county has with municipalities for sales tax. This was a new concept when we began this about 5 years ago. With the revenue sharing of occupancy tax, but also incentivizing the chamber to improve upon the tourism in the county by providing them 75 cents on every dollar that the county receives above the budgeted amount. That was a 5-year rolling average. So a good example that was just in effect with the pandemic was the drop in tourism dollars that we saw through occupancy tax during COVID. Had we only made 1-year appropriation to the chamber, they wouldn't have gotten anything. However, the blow was softened by the 5-year rolling average. And so that is something I think that's worked. I think that certainly worth talking about is that 75-25 split. But this resolution only gives authorization for the designation of tourism promotion agent and reminds you of the arrangement that we have.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Forsythe.
I support this, but I do think we need to look at how we cost share with them. I'd like to know how like Jefferson County and other counties around the offshore with their chambers. And it sounds like we use bed tax to justify how they're performing, and I don't know if that's really accurate. Sales tax, things like that would coincide, I would think. But I just wonder how other counties mechanically do it.
Mr. Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As part of this, can we also review the various outfits out there that are handling reservation systems to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly? The St. Lawrence County has been progressive in making sure that Airbnb and the bed and breakfast and entities such as that pay their fair share of bed tax and sales tax. I'm concerned that there are, we're seeing more and more of these national, international marketing outfits popping up. And, are we connecting, collecting from them as well? Like Verbo and others, so that all of these lodging places pay their fair share of helping to promote tourism in the county. I echo Dave, I see the county chambers been doing a terrific job of promoting St. Lawrence County and bringing people into St. Lawrence County. And I think we get, way more than, what we spend. And they compete on our behalf with a lot of much better funded tourism development agencies around the state, because back when the bed tax was first created, most counties in the state were encouraged to use the bed tax specifically to promote lodging and promote people coming into their counties. St. Lawrence County was one that chose to keep the revenue itself. And it was only when that contract was amended that we began sharing it on a more equitable basis. And, I just think that we should make sure that all the lodging places are treated equitably. And, we do our best to make sure that our tourism destination agency has the resources it needs to compete. The good news is when you look at, and I look on a regular basis, we're seeing more and more Airbnbs opening around the county because of the increases in the number of people who are coming here. And, this is at the same time that we've seen, several new hotels open in the county. And I know at my own business, there's still plenty of times where the hotels in Canton and Potsdam are all full up. And, people are forced to travel long distances to find a place to stay. And with the fishing tournaments that have been happening in the past couple of years. There's that pressure as well. So, I think we're getting quite a bit for the dollars we're investing.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. The next resolution has to be brought off the table, and that resolution is accepting the recommendations of the county administrator regarding the 2022 annual vacancy review analysis, including rescinding resolution number 281-2008, amending resolution number 304-2012. Resolution. Is there a motion has been made by Mr. Burke to move from the table? Is there a second? Second by Mr. Leckfield and Mr. Arquette. Okay, all those on there's no discussion on tabling. All those in favor of bringing this back onto the table, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we have the resolution in front of us. Would you like to speak? Your resolution.
So this resolution, as I bring you each year in August, because that's the month when the vacancy review committee was reinstituted. So on an annual basis, I take a look at where we are, some of the challenges we faced over the prior year, and I bring you recommendations that I would like you to consider. And that is what they are, based upon what we're seeing in our workforce. In some frustrations expressed by some of your senior staff, by some of the challenges we face in recruiting and retaining, and I bring these to you for consideration. So I just walked through the general basis. I guess this is what you would like to do. Back through it again. Okay. So I walked through generally what we do this year. There are 6 recommendations. In part, one is to continue a current practice. So one is my hope that we won't be prevented from doing that. The first I will speak to is the hiring freeze established over 12 years ago in 2008. And one of the things I think that's a challenge about that is a hiring freeze is a tool that organizations can use when times are challenging and decisions have to be made about, in part, one of the things Legislator Smithers mentioned about maintaining and sustainability. And I think when you have a hiring freeze in place, you can live by that policy. And in fact, the resolution here, which I believe is on Google Drive, but was provided when this was presented, indicated that 100% funded positions could also be filled, could continue to be moved forward. So there were some caveats to the hiring freeze that was put in place at that time. And it's my belief that down the road, we may need to put a hiring freeze in place again. And if we already have one that I would kindly point out we aren't living by, it would be wise to address that and have the tool back in the tool chest to bring out when it is appropriate. Leaving it in place when you're filling positions at 90% immediately, really none are being turned down, is, in my mind, leaving something out there. And it's my job or my role, I believe, to point out when we have policy and how our practices are reflected in the policy of the board. So that is the first option I bring to you. Shall we discuss them option by option?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So what you're actually proposing then is eliminating the vacancy committee.
There's no mention of any change to anything ever with the vacancy review committee. And if there were, I would have spoken to that first. I think the hiring freeze was not associated with the vacancy review committee. It is a standalone subject that the board can address at any time. This only removes the hiring freeze that was placed on as policy in 2008.
I agree. I was here for that. I think I'm the only one here at that time.
I think so.
I agree. It was needed at the time.
Yes.
It's a nice
Tool
tool
to
to
have.
have.
Mhm.
I agree. And I agree with number 1. I don't agree with all 6 of these though. So how are we
That's
gonna break these out?
We'll go through each one.
So we're gonna vote on each one individually, or what do you
I don't
think?
believe so. I think what we could do is if you want to remove that, you would make an amendment to do so.
Yeah, amendment to strike. If there's one that you want to have discussion
I think,
about.
I'm fine with 1 and 2.
okay, great. Okay, so I think that's the best way to do it. We'll go through them. I'm of the same. So the vacancy committee
No
would
change.
remain.
No change. We will continue also with the vacancy review committee, not mentioned here, with scheduling 2 legislators, unless I'm given other guidance. I think it's continues to be a great opportunity for legislators to be educated, but also for department heads to have an opportunity to speak to you about their departments.
I think
No change.
I think it's a great tool for legislators to get in on the process. And they can communicate to others, whether it's by email or by phone or whatever, what's going on. And they actually have 2 representatives. And when the position comes before, you had two legislators that have sat in on all the arguments for it.
That's right.
Well, I think that's valuable. Okay, let's move on to the second one.
So the second one asks, as mentioned in the title, to amend Resolution 304, 2012. So there was an interest at that time in a management compensation committee created to analyze the purpose, use, and benefit of the management salary table. And at that time, before we put a table in place, there was a scenario where there were 8 bands, and in that, let's say, 5th band, the person making the most moved the whole band because we weren't on a step schedule. Whoever was hired that was at the highest amount moved the total ceiling of that group. And so after some time, the committee identified that as a concern and wanted to take a look at compressing the table, but also whether or not we should have, or compressing the bands, but whether or not we should have a salary table. They didn't adopt a table, I think, until 15. And it might have been right after this, but what they made a decision to do was to slow down the increase of the salaries on an every other year basis. So in 1 year, you'd receive the CSEA benefit, which is the contract that we follow. You would receive that percentage. And then that following year, you would receive a flat dollar amount. So in an effort at the time, or a conversation anyhow, was discussed about saving money. The implementation of this strategy has not saved $1. All that has occurred is a redistribution amongst the group of the total. And what I mean by that is when you take the dollar amount, you take the total of everyone in the positions at the time, and it is far more than just our department heads. There's about 72 titles on this list. So these are folks who are unrepresented. These are our department heads, but these are also a variety of other positions of employees in the county. So what you do toward the end of the year is you take a total of the dollar amount of all of those employees, you divide it by how many employees are there. So if you don't have a department head at the time, or you don't have the titles represented, they aren't counted except at base. And you divide that into come up with a dollar amount, flat dollar amount, usually between $1,000 and $3,000, that you apply to everybody. So your top paid employee is given that dollar amount, and your lowest employee on the salary scale is given the same dollar amount. So what we figured out after observing this practice for a few years was long about band 5, right? So there's 8 bands. Long about band 5, you get to a point where you actually start to decrease the compensation you're providing the following year. The bottom 4 bands are disproportionately raised, and the top 4 bands are disproportionately decreased. So you're compressing, you have achieved the goal. Over these last 10 years, that has been accomplished. And in fact, looking at the increase over those years, the median percent increase from 2014 to 22, the top band has seen 15.51 increase. The bottom band has received 25.54 increase. I'll let that sit. So a job is classified by the job worth, by the responsibilities and the qualifications you have to do the job. And there's a variety of them, and they are all, every single one, critical to the function of county government. So nothing I will say and nothing you will respond should be interpreted as to devalue or overvalue any of these titles that we're talking about. But the reality is, what's been happening is, financially, you've been devaluing anyone from band 5 to band 8 in those flat $1 amount years. And what you've been doing is disproportionately increasing, not asking any more of them than you're asking of everybody else, disproportionately increasing the raises from band 1 to band 4. Not saving $1, just redistributing how those funds are paid. So my recommendation is the compression has occurred. The sandwich has been successful. Now, let's go back to equally distributing the percentage given to CSEA, which is what we always did prior to this happening, which is for this contract is 2.75, instead of having the dollar amount. Questions?
So the dollar amount was by, you took your 72 positions, you multiply that by the percentage increase. And then whatever that amount of money was, you divided it by the 72. So I do know when back in 18 or something, I think that I was chairman, anybody making $90,000 and above was disproportionately hurt. And that must be your band 6, 7, and 8.
Or depending on
So
where
you
you
had
are.
situations where you had somebody that was still on the bands that was actually making more than their supervisor, particularly at that $90,000 level. You went round and round about this.
Questions?
Yep. I think Tony had his hand up first. No? Okay, Mr. Spittis?
Would this provision, this removal have any effect on the current contract, or would this be on a future contract?
There is no contract for management, so would not be impacted. What we do is take the amounts negotiated in CSEA and apply that to the unrepresented group.
No effect on the contract
No.
with CSEA.
No.
John, you had your hand up?
It's based on Mary's question. What does that mean, the remainder of the contract?
So the schedule would be for 2023 would be the flat dollar amount. So if you were to accept these recommendations as written and they were approved at the December board meeting, we would apply the percentage instead of flat dollar amount.
Then we apply to January.
Correct.
But we can't change contract terms. We're just adding to.
No, you would actually, this is entirely separate from CSEA. There'd be no change to any CSEA employee.
The higher.
It just would be, that's just the, where we draw the percentage from for salary. That applies to management.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Forsythe?
My concern always goes back to management is part of the negotiating between CSEA. Correct?
Legislators make the decision on percentages.
They do.
They do. Staff do not have a vote. They could be excluded. We would welcome less work. I understand. We've gone, and I think your first round on the board, that issue was taken up on the floor. And the potential self-serving nature of it. But I think you've been in negotiations and you know that is not an easy part of our work.
I've been pressured, Dave. So, Mr. Lightfoot.
So what you're saying is that everybody in that group, that's group of 72, would get the same percentage raise.
Yes,
Guy at the bottom is going to get the same percentage raise as the guy at the top.
that's right.
So are you not unraveling what you've done? You've compressed it. Aren't you going to be doing the same thing by doing that? We're going to go right back to where we were as far as taking care of an issue, taking care of a problem.
So I can tell you over the next 10 years to that end, you're only mitigating what I mentioned before to the higher ends of the bands. So 5 through 8, getting 27, 25, 24, and 23. You're still, because of the difference now, you're still providing 35, 33, 31% increase over the next 10 years. So you are going to slowly, but you slowly got here over 10 years, right? It's not going to happen overnight, and it brings them back in line with the 2.75%. Treats everyone equally.
Yeah, Mr. Berg.
I'm assuming,
Joe, turn off yours. Mr. Lightfoot, your mic is. Try that, John. There you go.
I'm assuming you need this from a management perspective to retain leadership. The leadership that you have. I guess I'm just guessing, but it would be helpful for me to know what this means to you as far as operating county managing.
Well, there's two ways to that end that this is an impact. One is we have about half of our department heads that have come up through the organization, me, half of the department heads, just as a sample set, who've been hired from outside. Both become tremendously more difficult if we stay in the scenario we're in now. You disincentivize people to ascend in leadership because they make more annually, maybe not whole compensation, but they get a bigger raise every year if they don't take a promotion. So we may have great leaders who may say, no, I'd rather take what you're paying me instead of taking on more responsibility, you're paying me less annually. Secondly, I think it's only getting more challenging to recruit talent, and we want to have, again, going back to the tools, we want to have more tools available to us. And part of that is not telling someone every year that people you supervise actually are going to get a greater increase than you are. That's a challenge. And I am more than mindful of the fact that we work for the public, the fact that the public pays us to be here, but I also believe that we're asking a lot of the people that work for us. And that's a challenge to have to tell them that you're going to be paid less in your increase just because of the formula. Sounds like something we might hear from the state.
Mrs. Aguirre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That 10 years that Ms. Doyle referred to could be further mitigated by the next point down. Right.
We're still on this.
Certainly.
Yes, but they're related. So when you talk about it taking 10 years, there's still other ways that can happen, correct?
Potentially.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
The other thing I would say is you don't get a bigger raise, but everyone gets the same. This percentage of your base salary is a larger one. So somebody making 40,000 that gets $4,000 raise is a 10%. Somebody making 100,000 is the 4,000. You know, it's only getting 4%, but they equal at the same amount. It's still Marxist, it's not as much difference. So what you have is you have compressed it. You have redistributed the money. And so the problem is, like I said, you go back to an hiring talent. At $90,000, that's where there is a significant break. That seemed to be, and those are the large part, those are your top line people. As far as responsibilities. We went round and round. I just was doing hypotheticals and say, well, you've already paid somebody for that responsibility in your initial salary. Okay, so then if everybody kept going like this, but on a percentage basis, we made it compelling. So anyone against this proposal of Mrs. Doyle's? So we go to straight percentage. So for next year, everyone in that 72 positions will be getting a 2.75%. That's what the contract is. For a couple more years anyway. All right, so let's go on to the next one then.
The next one is requesting that after what will be 23 years, a compensation study RFP, that I be authorized to solicit input for completing a compensation study that would include essentially all of our titles. It would give us an opportunity as we prescribe. So some of the questions that came up the last time we talked this over was, what are they going to use? How are they going to use it? Well, we can write that into the RFP. And we can look at some of our neighbors and some of across the state folks that have been doing this. The industry recommendation is every 5 to 7 years. And we are at, as I said, number 3. Understanding that it has benefits and it has disadvantages depending on how it works. So the benefit of looking at some of these things is really looking at market pricing. It's looking at the base pay structure in our salary schedule. It's understanding how we may solicit input from the people who have employees who, a lot of you ask about exit interviews. People are getting paid more to go other places. So that would be included in the discussion. And whether it's public or private, we certainly always remark on the private sector can pay more, but they don't match the benefits. So there's a variety of things we can prescribe, know this, what we're looking for in their efforts. The job analysis they would do first. I talked with Johnny about this. They look at our job descriptions. Now, while civil service governs much of what we do, the job specifications can be tweaked at the local level to a certain extent to fit the need of the department. So they take a look at those first to drive the work that they're going to do. Then they also look at duties, hours, function, the interaction. They look at salary surveys that have been, NISAC completes one for the whole state. There's a variety. NACO has another bit of information that they collect and survey on it. It's better they look at to have more information than less. And what we're working from is only looking internally. So you may recall that a couple of years ago, we looked at a couple specific titles, and I went around the region and I sort of did a micro compensation study, if you will. I looked at what they're paying and I looked at their range and I looked at where we fit among those couple of titles. What I found was we weren't awful. We weren't terribly behind. We were okay competitive, second or third maybe in the hiring at the base amounts. Where we struggled was we topped out early, or they had gotten creative about what they do after 10 years or after certain types of education or qualifications are improved. So there's a number of different strategies that may come to us that we're not aware of now. And I think that part's worth looking at, figuring out 23 years in, looking at interest, looking at inflation, understanding we don't want to overburden the taxpayers, and they may come back and say, you're right where you should be, or you're only 1% or 2% off. And that outcome can guide our negotiations in 24 and 26. Or you may look at it and say, you know what, there's some adjustments we want to make today. That is at your discretion what you do with the compensation study. So this would be an objective third party. There is no way I would ask the human resources director of any organization to do that. I wouldn't be comfortable doing it. I would really like to have the ability to bring someone in. And if the legislators wanted to sit in on the scoring and the reviews and interviews, that would be welcomed as well, so that you carefully understand how they go about this. Jefferson County has added this to their budget for 23. They're 35 years in with not having a compensation study done. I believe there's about 6 counties around the state who've recently done, as of March of last year, have been working through compensation studies. And I think it's worth considering.
Okay, Mr. Lathrop.
Well, it's a pretty rosy picture that you painted, County Administrator. But all I can see going forward with this particular bullet point is that, and I think the timing of it is not good because of negotiations that are going to be coming up here next year, I assume, or I presume, right?
24.
24 they come up?
Yeah, 24,
Well,
26.
still, this isn't something that's going to be done overnight anyway.
Agreed.
All I can see is that unions are going to love it. And what they're going to love is the turmoil that's going to go with this because they're going to create it. And I think that we're doing a disservice, number one, to whoever is negotiating the future contracts by bringing something in, and you'll have the opportunity on the part of some people to cherry pick exactly what they like and cherry pick what they don't like and get rid of it. I think it will open up more issues than we're even thinking about right now. Maybe some for the good, but I think that the bad goes with the good. So I do not favor this bullet point at all. As honorable as what you're trying to accomplish, it is. I think it would also accomplish some unknowns. And I for one, at this stage of the game, I'm not prepared to engage in that, to be honest with you.
Sports side.
You said Jefferson County's doing it. What did they budget? How much, what's the cost of something like this?
I believe they budgeted 75,000.
I have the same reservation. I think this is a can of worms that will just spill over. I know a few years ago, Joe and I were on labor management, and there were some titles that we did look at.
And that's what I was
And
referencing.
there was concerns about it, and
Yeah.
we did do our due diligence, looked out. And, geez, most of them were right in the middle and whatever. I know the intention of all these accumulations of these ideas. We wouldn't even have been talking about these 8 years ago. 8 years ago, I can just hear Joe Timmerman right now, just screaming, they got more money than us, but when times are good, this is what happens, okay? And I was here when times were good and then they went sour, 2007, 2008. And I just hate to see that happen again, but, you know, this is a tough, this one's
And
gonna
I
be a tough.
think, to that point, if you think back on it, that was about, as I mentioned, the industry standards every 5 to 7 years. It really wasn't an option at that time to take a look at, so it wasn't. And then you come back through 50, you had no fund balance. And so you can see there's another 5 to 7 years. Nope, not a good time now either. And so I think bringing it before you, asking you to consider it, is my obligation. And it's your decision whether it's a recommendation or take a pass.
Mrs. Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm big for it, no surprise there, because I think there's a flip side to what was just brought up, and that is in negotiations, you can say, we've taken a look at what this should be or the standard, and this exceeds that, we will not acquiesce. So, I mean, it goes both ways, it's knowledge. It is not set in stone, it's knowledge for both them and for us. And let's face it, there is a competitive employment market. We need to know where we stand. We've spent more than 75,000 or whatever you're anticipating on things that had less impact. So I would say that this is a good thing. It can help on the flip side as well, to say that's not, these people that are coming in are not, they don't have a dog in the fight, right? So they're, like you said, neutral, detached, and it's information.
Mr. Glad.
And Mr. Chairman, I fully support this. In the private sector, as I would negotiate an agreement, some of what I would call the more astute salary side of the organization would whisper in my ear because they knew if we did well for the bargaining side, that likely the salary side would experience enhancements as well. Wasn't guaranteed, but very close to it. I think that's what this does. It makes things fair and equitable for both sides of the board, and I think it's an important thing. Have you taken a look into how other counties are doing this formula based? How is it similar?
Yes, and I can share that with all of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Denisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got mixed emotions on this. But I think, just this evening, we had a pass a resolution to tolerate more equipment. We're having folks resign because we're going to work for different places. I think what we need to do is maybe, I know this has been tried somewhat in negotiations, but instead of looking at all positions, look at the groups who are losing people. Look at the groups where we can't hire people. Whether it's MEOs, nurses, attorneys. Look at specific groups where we're having a difficult. That's not a carte blanche, but and I think there will be some.
Sure.
Well, I think information itself, I understand the concerns, especially with people who have been here and who have struggled through some difficult times. But on the other side of that, we've got a county administrator who's asking us, let me take a look, let me get some information. What we do with it, it's still within our control. I don't know, I guess I'm always inclined. The more assessment, the better. And we may find that there isn't any need to tweak salaries. But taking a look and having that information again, what we do with it is up to us, but, I'm in favor of Bruce gathering. Doing these.
Mr. Smithers.
This does seem like a gamble, because we don't know what we're gonna get. But I would tend to agree with John and Margaret, and even Larry there. When we get some information back, I'm willing to take the chance that they're gonna find that in some cases, we're underpaying, we're having difficulty hiring or maintaining certain groups. In other groups, we're doing okay, we're just fine there. So we may get some information we don't like, but we may very well get some information that we're gonna be happy with. So I think I'm willing to take a chance and see what information they'll give us back.
What else? So, no. I'm not in favor of this at all. It cost us $75,000 to figure out what your salary should be based on our survey of the 6 surrounding counties. In comparison to what school superintendents were. Not interested in NACO, a national organization, finding out, surveying across nationwide what compensating salary should be. And certainly not Westchester County being included by New York Association of Counties. At the very least, and my compromise would be, let's wait a year, find out, let's pony off of Jefferson County, find out what happened in Jefferson County. I think everybody's got anxiety about actually people leaving employment, not being able to compete. I think, Don, you were saying most of your positions were full, right? You had drivers, public health, all those nurse positions are full now. People are returning to work. I think that we pay well. It was a negotiated contract that was hard fought. And we actually settled for, which maybe doesn't sound great now at 2.75, but it was about a half a point more than what the norm was back then. I think that we can find out from talking to the 6 counties, Lewis, Jefferson, Franklin, Essex, or whatever around us that have similar earned incomes as household incomes, about how we should be able to pay our people and what it costs actually. For those that we can't compete in, maybe those services ought to be done by the private sector. So certainly we could do more about actually compensating our towns to plow our roads. If we can't compete for drivers, maybe we need to bump that up as far as what we're paying to plow our roads. Okay. Certainly with community services, we've been losing people there. We know that there's a vigorous private sector there that can do all those jobs. So, or many of them, I'll give them many, I don't say all those jobs. So I am not in favor of this whatsoever. Mr. Smithers.
The thing is, though, the negotiator that we have for CSEA right now is got this flat line, like what's good for one is good for all. So unless we do show her that there's some discrepancy in some groups, not in others, we're not going to get very far with her.
I think we're talking about maybe, I don't think we're talking about our baseline employees. I think we're talking about, our 72 positions.
No. Oh, this is all.
Go ahead, Mrs. Aguirre.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. I trust Ruth Doyle. I think she's bringing this to us in good faith as a recommendation, and not because we haven't only talked about it tonight. And I would suggest that we back up the person that we've empowered bring these recommendations. She doesn't have carte blanche. She has to come before this board. But if she's recommending this, and I think Mr. Burke alluded to it, if this is a tool she needs, then we should back her up. Thank you.
I find that interesting because you voted against the redistribution policy, but that's okay. So let's get a consensus. Let's just show of hands who's in favor of this. How many do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where's the 7th?
Nicole?
Oh, Nicole, okay, 7. So we don't have Rita, so this will go to the full board, 7, let's go. But we'll get a vote on the whole thing. Well, it's not an official vote, so it'll be a part of the resolution. To take it out. So,
7 what?
7-7.
7-7? Doesn't pass?
Well, we haven't taken an official vote, but so what we would do, since we're still in discussion, if somebody wants to make an amendment to remove that, then we could take a vote. That would probably be the thing to do. So if you're willing to take, to make an amendment, Mr. Lightfoot, to remove this from the resolution, we could vote. Still be 7-7. So.
I'm not willing to do that. I think we're look at the whole thing as a singular item, instead of trying to cherry pick, things out of it. The other thing we can do, well, never mind about the other thing.
Mr. Forsythe,
I'll make an amendment to remove it.
okay, is there a second to that amendment? Okay, by Mr. Perkins. Discussion on the amendment. The amendment is to remove the commission, to commission a compensation study. Okay, so discussion on that, Mr. Perkins.
Yes, in negotiations, with the contract, union contracts, we tried to change some of the titles. It didn't matter to the union, they wanted across the board. Raises across the board, they didn't want to look at it, so I don't think it's gonna make any difference if we have this or not. It would give us a little bargaining chip, knowing, and I think at $75,000, if we waited and maybe piggyback off Jefferson County or some others, we may be able to get that same information and move forward with that.
Sure.
I just want to clarify that we'll take an RFP process to determine what the cost would be. I was only sharing with you knowledge that I have, that it also may not cost that amount in another county. That was just information sharing as far as what they've set aside. It by no means would cost that amount for certain. We don't know that.
Anyone else on the amendment? Mr. Lightfoot.
So what you're saying,
Commissioner on your mic.
the amendment is to remove this last bullet point.
Third bullet.
The third,
Yeah, there's 2 pages.
The bottom, on the first page, is commission of compensation study to be prepared by an
okay,
outside organization.
and that's the only thing that we're dealing with this.
That's what the
amendment.
amendment addresses. So,
Thank you.
anyone else? Okay, so let's do a roll call on the amendment.
On the border.
Yeah.
If I may, we're roll calling, a yes is to. remove.
So,
Correct.
right, so what we're doing is Mr. Forsythe has made an amendment to remove the compensation study from this resolution. And second it, so we're taking a vote on whether or not we support the amendment. So a yes vote would support Mr. Forsythe and would remove this from this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Reagan,
Yes.
Forsythe,
Yes.
Lightfoot.
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers,
No,
Denisha,
No.
Perkins,
Yes.
Akers.
Yes,
Fay.
Yes.
Haggard,
No.
Yakko. No. Burke,
No.
Barclay.
No.
Terminelli,
No.
seven yes, 7 no, 1 absent.
so the amendment fails. Okay, so we'll move on to the next piece.
So the next item is an effort to continue with knowledge we have in COVID and some of the allowances that were provided. So this is the vacation buyback provision that would be subject to negotiation with our unions where this is present. What this provides for currently is if you request whatever hours you work, 35 or 40, a week's vacation time off, You can also have access to an additional 35 or 40, whichever number of hours you work per week, to be paid to you as a vacation buyback provision. So what it helps do is not only provide a decrease to your vacation accruals, but it maintains, so in most contracts, we have 400 hours as the ceiling of vacation hours you can carry in as accruals. And so this allows for those vacation accruals. Let's say in that provision, you're going to take a week off, you take a vacation buyback, you actually have either 80 or 70 hours taken off of because you're off for 5 days and then you're paid for 5 days. So during COVID, it was a challenge for us to have people take time off. So we gave them, if they had a minimum of 300 hours in their bank, we allowed them to take the vacation buyback provision, get the week's wages, but not be required to take the time off. So that being said here, it's a slightly different take on it. And in this way, vacation payout is something we pay to you when you or you resign. So what's provided for is the total amount of vacation hours you have on the books. That is not true with sick time or personal time. So from this perspective, it's a liability that we carry. And in fact, we've created a reserve that we set aside funds on because we know that we owe this obligation. So in this situation, what would be allowed would be a floor rather than a ceiling. So you have to have, you want people to have time on the books, a minimum of 100 hours in your vacation bank. Above that, in 35 or 40 hour increments, you could take the provision to drop your accruals, but you wouldn't be required to take the week off. Now, you wouldn't be restricted from doing that in the earlier iteration, but this would also give folks an opportunity. If they're carrying 400 hours, sometimes we're in situations where folks take a day off because they're at 400 hours and they want to bring those accruals down, so they use time. This way, they could get paid for that time. Their accruals are back down to 360 or a lower amount, and they're able to accrue time again. It's not something necessarily that we can deny time based on, but this would give them an opportunity, or if they had a trip planned or a big event coming up, or something that they needed an extra week's wages, we owe them anyway. This would just allow them to take a cut on it. Questions?
John, sure.
Ruth, is there any difference between the 35 to 40 hours in that figure, or is it just
Whatever, for example, highway employees, sheriff staff, they work 40-hour weeks.
Right.
Office staff typically work 35 hours. 40. I would take my week.
No, but I'm wondering the threshold to be able to eat.
Oh, no, 100 for everyone for tracking purposes.
It is, okay.
Yeah,
Mrs. Smithers.
as proposed.
Compensation rate on a vacation buyback, is that 100% of salary?
It is.
And on retirement, when they get paid for unused time, is that 100% also?
I would have to ask that question of HR. Repeat that again?
On retirement, when they get paid for unused vacation time, is that 100% of salary? 1 day's pay for 1 day, not you.
I think vacation sick time is used to years of service. Vacation time, I'm not positive. I would have to check that.
Renee, you have an answer to that?
Yes, thank you. So if you collect that time and are paid at retirement, you're paid your rate at that time. So obviously every year your salary increases. Undertaking a new practice where you'd actually pay it out earlier would actually cost the county less.
So, okay. Thank you,
Other
Renee.
questions?
Everybody's okay with this? Okay, looks like it.
Okay. And the fifth point, I actually would bifurcate if possible. The first is to continue the practice. So in my opening remarks, I talked about continuing the authorization that you provided. I think that I've been judicious about it and reported out to you on the changes when temporary positions are created. We've gotten better on the back end to make sure they're also abolished. But I think that from that perspective, I'd like to continue that practice. And then also the temporary, part-time management confidential staff to access. Those two separate ones, if there was a concern with any of them.
Any discussion?
Okay.
So I'll just say, we don't, part-time, dispatchers, don't access benefits. We don't,
This is interesting.
okay, who does it then?
Temporary.
Temporaries, but who else doesn't? There's part-time
Correctional.
corrections, there we go.
Yep.
So correction officers don't receive these benefits, so I don't think it's fair that administrative part-time people would do those. So I would object to the second part of that. I would, so if I'm the only one, then I'm the only one, but I central staff would have access to benefits and prorated accruals, when our corrections yards do not. Mr. Lightfoot.
I think these last two bullet points that we discussed would be much better handled in negotiations and not by fiat here, to be honest with you. There's certainly things that are worthy of taking a look at. I don't have a problem with that at all. But I think that not in this venue. Venue should be during contract negotiations.
Well, the temporary staff positions are, that has seemed to have worked well.
This could be different, I think, but, there's a lot of things in here that are caveat. We got a full board coming in January, brand new group. And I don't think it's fair for us to hamstring a brand new group. I'm gonna make a motion to table this till January finance.
Second.
So I have a motion on the table to table the whole resolution, is that correct?
Yep.
Or say. Okay, so let's do a roll call vote. Yes. So Mr. Forsyth has made a resolution to table the entire resolution, not just what we were just talking about, but right from the whole thing.
Good move.
Everything right at the top, John. So what he's making the motion for is what was tabled before, whole thing. Okay, so we have a resolution or a motion to table this resolution that we have just, that we brought off the table and have been discussing. So is everyone clear? So what we're voting on is a motion to table the entire 2 pages here. Okay, that was made by you and seconded by Mr. Smithers and Mr. Arquette.
No, just that.
Oh, was it you? Okay, Mr. Arquette. So sewer roll call.
Forsyth,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Sheridan,
Yes.
Smithers.
No.
Nisha.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Akers.
Yes.
Bay. Haggard. No. Yaco. No. Bert.
No.
Arquette.
Yes.
Terminelli.
No.
Reagan.
Yes.
Eight yes, 6 no, 1 absent.
Okay, so it is tabled to the January finance meeting. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Last 2 items for this evening is to report out to you to transfer of funds. The first one is for purchasing, advertising, my apologies, $1,400 for advertising. The board had authorized earlier this year the fill of the buildings and grounds supervisor to assist with capital projects. Unanticipated departure in August required us to go back out. So that is something that I believe we have our new supervisor starting tomorrow. And the second transfer is for $3,200 to assist in the print and mail room with specialty paper that costs more, as well as additional cost due to more in-house printing. So it's, going the direction we'd like, but it's going to be a little more expensive this year. So we're asking to transfer $3,200.
Okay, so let's move on. Any questions for Mrs. Doyle? Okay. We'll start with the committee reports, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Mr. Denisha.
Mr. Chairman, nothing to report.
Thank you. Mrs. Curran is not here. Fisheries Advisory Board, Ms. Terminelli.
Our meeting last week was canceled, so we don't have another meeting until the end of January.
Okay, Governor Fair Board, Mr. Smithers.
A Governor Fair Board had their annual meeting November 16th, where they elected new officers. I did not attend. I haven't received a report of the new officers yet, so I do not have a report.
Okay, all right, let's move on to Highway and Solid Waste, also with you, Mr. Smithers.
Okay, we met, Joe Lightfoot and myself with Don Chambers, Susan Beller from the town of Messina, and Susan Wood from the town of Hopkinton, November 2nd. And we reviewed the contract for plowing. The county has the town plow a number of roads for them, 122 miles. And we talked about changes that we'd like to make, not for this year, because this is the last year of the 3-year contract, but for the next plowing season. Presently, there's 22 towns on tier 1 and 4 on a different tier 2. And I can't give you all of the, because we're negotiating, so I can't tell you everything now in public, but in executive session I could. But they want to go to 1 tier instead of having a 2-tier system. So we discussed that possibility, how we could achieve that. Presently, the contract is has an escalator clause in there for fuel and salt, so we're paying $200 a mile more for this season at the present time, given the cost of fuel, and because of the escalator clause in there. So if you want to figure that out, the 122 miles that we pay, the $200 a mile more that we're going to have to pay at the current rate, that's going to increase what we pay in 2023. We had a pretty good meeting. We're going to meet again after they take back our discussion to the various towns. We talked about different possibilities. They want to have an exit possibility for some of the towns not to plow the roads that we're currently paying them to plow. We talked about the possibility of giving some of the roads to the towns. I don't know how that's going to go, but we'll see what happens. Anything else, Joe? Let's say at this time.
I don't have anything else. You covered it very well.
Okay. The Industrial Development Agency, Mr. Reagan.
The Industrial Development Agency is meeting tomorrow.
Okay. Recreation and Trails Advisory Board, Mr. Arquette.
Mr. Chairman, just on the way here, I got invited to a meeting in St. Regis Falls on Thursday at 6:30 to discuss moving in that direction collaboratively with the county, and I want to extend that invitation to Chairman Sheridan and Chairman or Legislator Denisha and Perkins as our Legislative Trails Committee, 6:30 on St. Regis Falls at the Sports Club. Thanks. Thursday, this Thursday, 6:30.
Okay, the RBRDA, Mr. Forsyth.
We haven't met since the last.
Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Hager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of things. The FISU World University Games, the torch relay will be in Canton and Potsdam this Friday, December 2nd. All legislators are invited to attend the torch ceremony at 3 p.m. in the Canton Village Park. The torch will then go to Potsdam and be part of the Clarkson hockey game and the first responders appreciation night. And this one is in particular for Mrs. Big Wharf. There's a craft food wine holiday show at SUNY Potsdam Maxey Hall on December 3rd from 10 to 5 with over 100 regional producers selling their wares. Thank you. Oh, our next meeting is December 8th.
You can't call in sick.
You can't call in.
The third of the board.
That's good. Thank you, Mrs. Hager. Soil and water, Ms. Burke.
Our crop specialist for soil and water is finishing up her training to become a certified crop specialist. On the AEM, they're still working on plans. There's a proposal for a new project, an erosion control project in Mountain Farm. And they're working on the second round of bids for the tree removal. The bids for Hammond and Morristown have been submitted and accepted. And Ruth is working with Kevin to iron out all the details of that. The guy that's going to be doing it has a chipper that takes 24-inch stock, and they said he's even taken up to 30 inches. And that, like Bruce said, he would be done in 7 to 10 days. Pretty impressive. That's it.
Yeah, you could do a tree like in 3 minutes. The stationary right on the side of the road. It's looks like a log loader, but it can reach out 75 feet. Grabs a hold of it. It's got a circular saw, zips it down, picks it up, and shoves it through the chipper. So it's a $700,000 machine. I think he's the only one in town that's got one. Where's it? Keysville, right? Keysville, which is just south of Plattsburgh.
Cuts his stump off it before he does that.
But it grabs a hold of it just like a buncher feller. You know, just clamps onto it hydraulically and zips it. So the truck itself has platforms that hydraulically go out and establish the base. So it'd be 2 people on the job, one guy in the truck. And the other guy would be just grabbing and chipping. I don't know where they're gonna find a home for the chips. Really safe and substantially under the other bid. Big time. So sounds really promising. And this is their downtime, guys, longer. This is downtime, so they want to get going on this. So we could do Oswegatchie, I think is the next bid up, right, John? Okay, Mrs. Haggard, the broadband ad hoc committee list.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. I'd like to ask that the report on that be moved to the operations committee meeting, if we could, because we have a meeting on Wednesday and we also have some important updates that would be more useful to have it on operations. If you would not mind.
Thank you. For old and new business, is there any old business? Okay. Is there any new business? Okay. Is there a need for executive session?
Yes. For negotiations, personnel, for the medical, financial credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a person, or corporation, and for 2 appointments.
Okay, and we ask that Ben and Glenn say, please. So a motion to go into executive session made by Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Forsythe. All those in favor, say aye.